They are one of the largest nations in BC. Nunamic territory encompasses one of the most productive and resource-rich areas at the heart of the Salish Sea. In 1860, we were named Nanaimo, derived from Nunamic, a collective name for the 5 villages that were located in the area. It was the discovery of coal that attracted many colonists to the area. Buildings were constructed near the waterfront and close to the mines. Mining, fishing, logging, lumber milling, sandstone quarrying, and transport industries were developed. We became an official city on December 24th, 1874, with a population of 1,000 residents. The wealth and confidence in the economic future of Nanaimo inspired a construction boom. Communities also formed around Nanaimo as other coal deposits were discovered. Between 1881 and 1925, coal was the primary fuel of the Western world, and Nanaimo enjoyed its most productive and prosperous years at that time. Attracted by work in the mines or business opportunities, other ethnic groups, other than the English and the Scots, and the Nunamic are already here, including the Japanese, Croatian, Chinese, Finns, and Italians, came to settle in Nanaimo, along with many others thereafter. By 1941, our population had grown to 12,635 residents. One by one, the mines closed as oil gradually replaced coal as the primary fuel source. Nanaimo has remained resilient, however, and came back stronger during other challenging times, including strikes, depressions, and wars. Our coat of arms notes our city was built on faith and labor and unlimited possibilities. In 1975, the city amalgamated to include Harewood, Cedar, and Departure Bay. Our population nearly doubled. We are approximately 20 kilometers long, 12.5 miles, and 2 kilometers wide, 1.2 miles, but our total area in mass is 91.3 square kilometers. The city has 975 hectares of parkland. As Nanaimo grew and increased its population, more infrastructure and amenities that we continue to enjoy today had to be built. Today, the city of Nanaimo is responsible for maintaining and updating nearly $3 billion in infrastructure. Over time, these will need to be replaced and additional infrastructure will be required to support a growing and resilient economy. But with effective corporate planning, financial policies, and direction, the city will continue to operate successfully in this very challenging environment. Our strategic plan vision is to be a community that is livable, environmentally sustainable, and full of opportunity for all generations and walks of life. The city's commitment to our business community continues as we've just completed an economic development strategy to guide the future resiliency of our economy. A larger resource investment into economic development is slated for 2021. The new economic development strategy focuses on 6 areas: infrastructure, business development, skills development, talent attraction and retention, innovation and technology, social and environmental responsibility, and marketing. The City of Nanaimo currently has issued 6,281 business licenses, the highest on record, representing a 7% growth in the last decade. We're now the 2nd largest urban centre on Vancouver Island and the 5th largest in BC. The city has recently partnered with BC Housing to provide a record number of affordable and supportive housing units on 6 area sites. In 2020, the 2nd largest year in our history for building permits, we issued permits of $243 million. Shortly after the pandemic began, the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resiliency was formed with recommendations on 6 priorities, which will be developed in Nanaimo Builds, the Mayor's Nanaimo Leaders Table, Strategic Investing, Reconciliation and Anti-Racism, Prepare for Future Events, and Support for Small Businesses. The city has nearly $72 million in water infrastructure projects planned in the next 5 years, including a $20 million Midtown water supply upgrade to start in 2021. People are choosing Nanaimo as a city they want to raise their family in, work in, invest in, learn, and play in. As you can see from the photos and memories of what we were and what we have grown to be as the harbor city, the development of other industries saved us from becoming a mining town, a ghost town like so many other early British Columbia communities, and it has been remarkable. As you can see from the photos, there are a number of projects underway or recently completed. Our future, as they say, is bright. We are not done growing. We are 100,000 voices strong. As Mayor and on behalf of Council, congratulations to the City of Nanaimo on reaching your 100,000 milestone population growth. I want to express in particular my thanks to all of the staff who are involved in this presentation tonight. We have an amazing city staff and they contributed in many ways with a lot of very good ideas. It is an important milestone in the city's history. And as you saw the picture of the Setback flag, which now flies at the top of City Hall, our future is indeed bright. With faith and labor and unlimited possibilities, we have a long ways to go yet. I know that for some it is a difficult adjustment from the small town they may have grown up in or their grandparents knew, but there is much to be positive about in this city's future. As new agreements are reached with the Port Authority, with Setback First Nation, agreements around cooperation, as VIU continues to attract students from around the world, we are poised to be the city that I think all of us want it to be, that is livable, that is a leader, that is attractive to everyone, sets an example. So forgive the pride tonight, but 100,000 is a big number and it deserves celebration. I just want to thank everyone for listening tonight. Much appreciated, and congratulations, Nanaimo. We have nothing to rise and report about, Ms. Gurry. We do have presentations, though. Delighted tonight to welcome Dr. Sandra Allison, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, our new medical health officer for Central Vancouver Island region, from Island Health, who's going to provide us with a bit of an introduction. And I hope that Dr. Allison is better at technology than the mayor.
Hello, it's Sandra Allison here.
Good evening. We can hear you. This is good. And welcome.
Excellent. You tell me when you're ready for me to introduce myself.
Whenever you're ready,
Take it away?
Allison. Yes, please, Dr. Allison. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Good evening, Council and Your Worship. My name is Dr. Sandra Allison, and I'm a new medical health officer here in Nanaimo. So I'm very glad that you welcomed me to Council. I've met a few of you, and it's been a pleasure to meet you. I do have to say that being new to Nanaimo at a time when the pandemic is upon us, it's challenging to make these connections, and I have to confess that not seeing you on the video here makes it doubly challenging in this situation. So I'm just going to picture Leonard and Jake sitting across from me and the discussion that we had. A few things that I think are relevant and important to the Council, and I'll be very brief because I do want to hear from you questions and invite any other sort of comments from you. The pandemic at this time, the cases this week are higher than they have been in past weeks. And we knew that at the end of the year, after Christmas, when we had a bit of a lull, that we would see quite a bit of cases and coronavirus. And in fact, we're seeing that. Very busy time. I'm responding daily to cases in our communities, in our schools. Other teams are responding to cases in our facilities. And it's important that people recognize that while we know that a vaccine is on the horizon, that we do have a pressure at the time to maintain our attention to the most fundamental principles of responding to the pandemic. And that includes hand washing and keeping your social distances small, your social circles small, as well as be staying home when you're unwell. A lot of people are interested in the vaccine and the vaccine rollout with respect to the coronavirus vaccine, and I've had conversations with many of you. And the provincial direction is what we're following when we roll out the vaccine. But the response to the coronavirus pandemic at this time is really only part of the work that I do as a medical health officer, although it seems to take all of my time. I do like to take time like this to just speak to Council and maybe address some questions you might have around coronavirus, but also express my interest and an open invitation to council to have discussions regarding all manners of health, including promotion of health and wellness related to some of the housing and the health and housing task force that you have underway, and any other ways that we can look to build out the community and continue to improve the health of the population in the community. So as a physician working in public health, not only do I take care of people individually in the clinic, I take care of a community. And that's what I like to just express. The most important message that I share with the communities that I care for is that I really try to understand how to help the community achieve their health goals as if they're my patient, and trying to understand how to meet you where you're at and really understand what it will take to make Nanaimo the healthiest place it can be, and with the help of council and the community members and researchers and people like myself working in public health. So I could talk for a very long time, but what I prefer is just to hear from the council members any questions they may have around coronavirus or any other concerns they have or opportunities they think that I should be taking advantage of with related to public health. So in the community of Nanaimo. So thank you for welcoming me.
And thank you very much, Dr. Allison, for taking the time tonight to speak to us. Councillor Armstrong has a question.
Thank you. Regarding the coronavirus, we're seeing articles out of Alberta, Ontario, and the Maritimes that there's as much as a two times or 200% increase in child abuse showing up in the hospitals due to COVID. Are we seeing the same things in BC? Or are you tracking that? Pardon?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay. With respect to the unintended consequences of the pandemic, one of the major activities with respect to measuring some of these consequences, including harm to individuals and harm to self, we've seen in places like Las Vegas increased rates of suicide, particularly in teens. So we know that mental health and the social impact of having such a prolonged distressing event are really significant. I don't have the numbers locally, but I absolutely would be working with a team who's working on unintended consequences to understand if we are seeing an increased burden of either intimate partner, domestic violence, or even just spontaneous, crimes against person and whatnot. I imagine it is growing.
And would we be doing an education campaign such as the City of Ottawa is doing around this?
Oh, I haven't seen that campaign, so I would be interested to see that. But if at any time that you try to implement change with the population, education is one component, and then there's all the other things that need to go with it, including trying to understand what supports families require, and that includes healthy spaces and community, which may be challenging to provide at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Allison. I think we're all looking forward to the time when you can appear in front of us in person, which is far, far preferable. I'm going to ask a really cheeky question, forgive me, but do you feel your office is adequately resourced to handle the problems that you face at this particular time?
Oh, I'm feeling a bit at a loss because your internet is cutting in and out. But what I'd like to just say is, I think I heard you say, do I think that my office is adequately resourced to respond to the crises at this time? And if that were to be merely the pandemic at this time, I might say yes. Combine that with an overdose pandemic, combine that with poverty and a social disconnected population, I would say absolutely not. Any of the solutions that we're going to find to address concerns in our population are done in a partnered manner, and certainly one piece at a time. And I think really trying to get this pandemic behind us is going to be one thing, but trying to keep our population healthy as we go forward is going to take a community to keep that alive and well.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questioners. So again, appreciate you taking the time this evening, and welcome again to Nanaimo, and good luck with your work, and we'll continue to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Ms. Gurry, the next item, committee minutes, no motion required, just received. We need a motion for adoption of consent items. I'm going to ask that the removal of items be considered separately after motion for adoption has been moved and seconded. So is there motion, Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Hemmons, and Councillor Turley, I believe you wanted item 10A1 removed? Thank you. All right, with respect to all the other consent items, all those in favor? Any contrary? None? Thank you very much. Councillor Turley, Sustainable Procurement Policy and Procurement Policy Update, please.
Thank you. Am I on? Yep. So first of all, I would like to say that I certainly appreciate all the effort and everything that's gone into this, and I don't intend to foolishly bring forward any suggested amendments, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm heard about my concerns about one section of the procurement process, and that is with regard to fair compensation. And there's a couple of issues I have with that. Number one, does that apply to the distributor and or the manufacturer, or just one or the other? That's one question. And the second is, sorry, I read my notes properly here. Why is this included without?
Councillor Turley, maybe we'll get the first question answered.
Okay, sure,
first.
that's fine. Go ahead.
Is there someone? Ms. Ligon, if you can give us a bit of an answer, that would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Turley. The fair compensation is handled with respect to the collective agreement that we have as well, so that we make sure that our employees are fairly compensated and employees of suppliers are fairly compensated. At this point, we do not have a living wage or for our region that we could apply, and we certainly honor the intent of fair compensation among the suppliers that we choose. It would be very difficult with respect to their downstream suppliers to also require manufacturers to have the fair compensation. However, there are other aspects of sustainable procurement, including ethical and regulatory requirements in many, many countries that would apply and would limit our exposure to unfair practices.
Thank you. And just two questions. The second one is, while the optics, in my opinion, are well-intentioned, the reality is I'm not convinced it's that easy to do. And I believe when I asked this question before, staff indicated that it is a bit challenging. And so to add to the challenge, I just wanted to find out, with regard to a living wage, which is in itself is a bit ambiguous, does that include, in addition to wages, commissions, bonuses, gratuities, that type of thing? In other words, are we looking at the employee's total benefit package or income package versus just an hourly wage?
Through your worship to Councillor Turley, my past experience that it is the hourly base wage because the balance of benefits are unpredictable and sometimes very seasonal as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Gurry, did you have something?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to that, the clause in the collective agreement, it's only for the types of services that city employees provide already. So anything outside of that, that clause wouldn't apply to. So it's just like jobs that our city employees already currently do.
Sorry, that wasn't made clear to me before, but that makes more sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, through you, I do have a question for Ms. Ligon. We heard the presentation some weeks ago on the sustainable procurement policy, and I was really impressed with it. It's something I certainly do support. But when I looked over the policy, to be honest, I was surprised that the sustainable procurement policy is not simply a subset of our overall procurement policy, rather than, as we see it here tonight, a totally separate policy and therefore presumably having equal weight. And I have some concern over that in the sense that under the purposes of our procurement policy, one of the goals is to protect the interests of the citizens of Nanaimo, ensuring the city obtains the best value and goods outcomes for its expenditures, which of course I'm sure we'd all support. But that same purpose does not appear in the policy for sustainable procurement. So if I could be assured that sustainable procurement falls sort of under the general procurement policy, I would be a lot more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe. So excellent point. And it is, what's the right word? The procurement policy of the city has primacy over the sustainable procurement policy as it is new. And the intention is that we will walk before we run, before it really gets wings and flies, as we mentioned in the presentation. And the point there is that we need to learn. So as a learning organization and the implementation, we'll be getting a lot of feedback like the feedback you provided today to us. And that will be incorporated in a more robust sustainable procurement policy, which we anticipate to merge with our procurement policy next update round. So in a couple of years, we see them merging and becoming one. I think to give you some confidence that sustainable procurement qualifications from our vendors will trump best price or best value for dollar, we expect that the sustainable procurement aspects of an RFP or RFX might have a 10% weighting on the final decision as we start. We'd like to see that grow over time as we get experience and the vendors and suppliers get experience and start to build the capacity. But to begin with, we're going to see a fairly low percentage weighting. So in actual reality, it's going to be a minority weighting of the overall award decision. And so it's a secondary policy to the primary policy from that perspective. With donut economics and circular economy, it will gain more prominence as we become more adept as an organization and suppliers build it into their business models, and the pricing starts to flatten out as well and not be quite, as it's anticipated to be quite disparate from just a regular delivery. So the externalities and the long-term consequences of lowest price don't become a factor anymore because so much more of the qualifications require a long view and cost avoidance initially, but costs that the city will have to anticipate if we do choose, say, the lowest price versus the best value. That's going to be part of the benefit of the sustainable procurement policies implementation over time, that we will gradually move to that utopian state where we're making the best decision based on ethics, environment, and price, and social values all wrapped up into one.
Thank you for that very full response. And yes, we all want to get to that utopian society. But it's funny how we hesitate to use the term that something will trump something now. It's just fallen out of favor.
Did I say that?
But we'll forgive you that. But no, seriously, thank you very much. And I know our staff will always take financial responsibility and fiscal responsibility into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The road to the New Jerusalem is long and hard. Ms. Gurry, we don't need a separate motion, just call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That deals with the consent items. There are no delegations unrelated to agenda items. And the first item under reports is the Animal Responsibility Bylaw, Associated Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw, and promise to return to council policy. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm introducing this report, and then you will hear from delegations and proceed with direction to staff. So in front of you this evening is the Animal Responsibility Bylaw and accompanying bylaw and policy for 3 readings, and or you can refer it back to GBC. So there's 2 options in front of you this evening. I just want to give kudos and a shout out to staff once again. Ms. Robertson has done a remarkable and thorough job, many reports and research and consultation and analysis. So just really hard work by her, and so her appreciation. I know you have all appreciated her hard work, and so have I. So the bylaw is before you tonight based on a review done by Mr. Alan Nielsen of Nielsen Strategies. He reviewed the whole animal services program that the city offers and services the city offers. Out of that review, there was a few recommendations regarding the animal shelter facility, the bylaw, as well as this animal services contract. The bylaw was before you modeled by under the BCSBCA model, was recommended by Mr. Nielsen, and council directed staff to proceed using that model as their base. So staff has done that. There was consultation, legal review, draftings, and Ms. Robertson produced a bylaw for your review and revision at the last GPC meeting. You directed some changes, and that is the bylaw that is before you. So as I said, there's two options, and now we'll hear from the delegations.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry, and if I may echo your comments about the work of staff, particularly Ms. Robertson. This is a massive undertaking, and obviously I'm not going to be anything other than straightforward. It is controversial within the community, and we've received a great deal of correspondence. And perhaps, in fairness, some unfair commentary to City Council and to staff around this, but that is the nature of politics. I'm very happy to welcome as delegations for 5 minutes each. Firstly, Alison Cuffley, Officer, Government Relations, BCSPCA. Yes?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, just before the delegation starts, I just want to let you know that not a delegation, but after the delegations have been heard, Ms. Carly Calclo, I'm sorry if I didn't get your last name right, from the animal shelter who looks after the animal contract here in Nanaimo, she's available for any questions council might have as well.
Very good. I thought she would be here as a resource person tonight. Nice to see you on the screen. Ms. Cuffley, 5 minutes. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. I'll indicate orally that you've only got a minute left, if that works for you. So if you
That's great.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about Bylaw 7316 again. The City of Nanaimo's Animal Responsibility Bylaw. As mentioned, my name is Alison Cuffley, and I'm the Government Relations Officer for the BCSPCA. Quickly, I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from the ancestral and unceded land of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and the downriver Halkoominam-speaking Musqueam in my own nation of Tsleil-Waututh. So Aitzwal, and thank you for inviting me virtually to your meeting. I understand that after a lengthy constituent consulting process, some concerns were brought to the attention of your council, and I hope that I can be of service to address these. In my experience with bylaw policy and government relations, I can confidently say that the bylaw in front of you right now is one of the most progressive and proactive in the province. The City of Nanaimo has a real opportunity to be a leader in regards to animal welfare, as well as setting a standard for other municipalities to follow. Nanaimo can demonstrate progressive leadership in this area of animal welfare, as well as public health and safety, by including these best practices for municipal policy, as they are based on scientific evidence. Incidents involving cat overpopulation, dangerous dogs, and exotic animals have created expectations for regulators to proactively address these issues. So I thank you again for the immense attention to detail given in review of this bylaw by your council and staff. As mentioned, not only does it demonstrate best practice for animal welfare, but important provisions to address the root causes of animal-related issues in your community. In particular, we're very pleased with the removal of breed-specific legislation, mandatory permanent ID for all companion animals, and the inclusion of standards of care. One of the major concerns that I saw during the feedback process and engagement period relates to nuanced language and the request for some minor linguistical changes. So I'd like to forewarn council about the potential problems that it causes. When things like this are built into a base bylaw and not via amendments, it can really open you up to situations where by trying to cast this wide net, you're actually really drawing yourself in. So I'm under the impression that this current bylaw has already been vetted for enforceability by a legal team, which means that as it stands, the bylaw is able to be enforced as this base bylaw, and it gives the opportunity for you to make changes necessary to suit the needs of your community as time goes on. In fact, by attempting to cover all of your bases with this linguistic changes and narrowing the focus of the bylaw, you're actually opening it up for broader interpretation, as the focus will continually get narrower and narrower until every possible outcome must be listed within the bylaw. For example, I know there's a concern about the definition of a leash, not incorporating extendable leashes. So for example, by building in this language around extendable leashes, you then need to define what exactly is an extendable leash. Can it be homemade? There's specific fabric that the cable has to be made of. And if you don't explicitly state these, then someone could definitely just claim that their extendable leash is a garden hose on a retractable wheel, unless those specifications are set out. The BCSBCA fully supports equitable enforcement action that doesn't penalize the average responsible pet guardian. So for example, one comment I saw involved the turnaround from when a notice of disposition is mailed to a registered owner of a stray animal. In my 10 plus experiences of working with the SPCA at branch level as a receptionist and animal control officer, I can wholeheartedly say that every effort is made to reunite animals with their guardians, regardless of business days. For example, I can recall one instance where an animal had gotten away from their sitter while the owner was on holiday, and we actually held him for weeks because the owner couldn't identify another trusted source to redeem their animal to. So I assure you, no one is in this business for the money or the excellent working conditions. We care about the animals that we interact with. So as such, you'd be hard-pressed to find any staff within animal enforcement services who won't take the initiative to find an owner through modern means such as community Facebook groups, Pet Finders BC, and the BC Pet Registry. So while it would be inane to add these specific methods to a bylaw, it is understood that 72 hours does not include weekends, statutory holidays, or any other postal delays, such as those happening now during the pandemic. As such, I implore Mayor and Council to take the prudent steps to approve this bylaw as is, with the understanding that amendments can be made at any point as the bylaw is enforced and changes need to be made to suit Nanaimo. No bylaw is ever going to satisfy 100% of constituents or stakeholders, but by neglecting the underlying issues around animal welfare in your community, the City of Nanaimo opens itself up to becoming a safe haven for animal hoarders, illegitimate breeders, and tiger kings. So thank you for the opportunity to advocate for the animals in your community who will be affected by this new bylaw. And I really hope that the City of Nanaimo will become a leader for animal welfare in our province. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the comments. Does Council have any questions for the delegation? I see none. So next I'd welcome Leon Davis, Branch Manager, Nanaimo BC SPCA. Mr. Davis, good evening.
Hi. Allison is a hard act to follow, so she's the expert, and I just want to use some time just to say thank you to everybody involved in this process. It's definitely been no small endeavor. Thanks to Mayor, Council for giving this a serious consideration that it deserves. To all the stakeholders involved, the community for all of their input, and especially to Karen, who spent so much time learning and researching and listening to create this bylaw. This is a great document. It provides for the welfare and protection of so many pets and animals in Nanaimo. We have cats, the #1 animal control issue in the city, with really no representation in the bylaw. And for me, after 12 years of seeing almost 10,000 of them come through our doors, I'm kind of heartened to know that they may finally get, and we and the whole community, some attention and help in a meaningful root cause manner, which is what this proposed bylaw does. It's going to reduce a heavy burden from hundreds of community volunteers who are trying to stem the tide of suffering for outdoor and stray cats. I think agencies like ours and Catnap, we've kind of always felt like the young Dutch lad who's trying to plug the leaking dike with his finger while more leaks just keep springing up everywhere. There are some people who have said to me they don't see an issue in their neighborhood. And you know what? It's because of agencies like ours and Catnap running at our capacity to mitigate this issue as much as we can, and it's not sustainable. Just today, we got a call from concerned person. There's 30 to 40 cats with multiple litters living in an Nanaimo basement suite. We're preparing ourselves to intervene. It's going to be a heavy drain on our resources. It's going to take up all of our available room, but we're going to get in there and we're going to help not only the cats but the people in this situation. There are some mental health challenges as well. And we want to help the people, not just the animals. They so often go hand in hand. I know there's been some disagreement in the community. Some of it's driven from misinformation and misunderstanding. And some, sadly, has been from outright disinformation. But I think that this is such a solid foundational welfare bylaw Whereas Alan has said, if unanticipated issues or burdens arise because of it, it can be revisited anytime. And I think if we wait until there's 100% consensus on every minutia and detail linguistically on it, then this opportunity is going to be missed. A living document kind of allows for continued discussion in the future, and I worry that if we don't get this foundation in place, then smaller volunteer-run organizations like Catnap aren't going to be able to keep up. And we've almost lost them before, and if we do lose them in the future, then an Nanaimo PCA won't be able to take on the 500 or more cats that they deal with every year, and it's going to create an explosion of homeless cats in Nanaimo. For other pieces of the bylaw, there's finally some assistance for us in getting compliance with animal neglect and welfare issues, freeing up really valuable constable time to focus on the most egregious of the cases locally. Respond to something like 400 cruelty and neglect complaints in the area, and many of these could be addressed in this bylaw before we have to become involved. And there's also better protections in the community for dangerous dogs to protect everybody, and also take some burdens away from owners of dogs that are wonderful and have social pets being targeted because of their breed. And not to mention another call that we had today was combating puppy mills. We've got another situation coming up, which we're preparing ourselves for with that on top of the cats. And of course, with COVID and limited volunteers, I'm kind of trying to figure all that out. But I'm hoping for some help. And this bylaw is the kind of help that is going to make things easier for the people who are trying to increase the welfare for animals in Nanaimo and also to help the people in the community. So again, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been tough go at moments coming to this point, but thank you for offering possibly the chance of help for us, help for other rescues, for the community, and of course for the animals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Councillor Turley has a question.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Davis, or perhaps somebody else can answer it. One of the concerns that was expressed was identifying pets, probably mainly dogs, through the use of microchips. And my question is, how up to date is the database to try to connect the actual information on the microchip with an actual person and address or the owner of that dog or animal? Is it fairly accurate, or is it?
I'm happy to take that. I'm happy to take that one. The BCSBCA does run the BC Pet Registry, so it's up to the owner to update their information post-adoption or post their registration. In my experience redeeming animals at the branch level, microchip information is usually kept more up to date because it's quite easy to just go online and update your profile, as opposed to old school tattoos where you actually have to remember the clinic where it was done, call them, make sure someone physically updates paper copies. So microchip identification is usually the most accurate permanent ID.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is actually to Ms. Kolkoff, is that okay? Your organization had input into this drafting of this bylaw, I understand. As the agency that will be responsible for implementing it, do you believe that this bylaw is the best bylaw that we could have at this time, and you feel quite confident to be able to implement it? Take that as a no. I don't know.
Carly, are you able to hear? Oh, she looks like she's might be frozen.
That's about little creatures, isn't it?
We'll see if we can get her back, because yeah, I don't see any movement there. So I think she's been lost there. Just one moment.
That was a really bad pun.
I do have another question for staff, if I may, at this time.
Yes, please. Ms. Cuffley, or did you say staff?
If she's not back on, but if she's coming on, I'll wait.
She's not yet. She's not, Councillor Bonner, so not yet anyway. So if you want to try us, you could try us.
And so my question is now to staff in terms of updating the bylaw. There's a number of things that have been brought to my attention as consideration of the bylaw that might be a concern, especially or problematic. One of them is the ability to appeal decisions made by the animal control bylaw officers. There were some issues regarding retractable leashes and the ability to train dogs to return, which they're used for. There's also questions of can the person get an exemption to the bylaw if they have a vet's note? There's many parts in the bylaw that are not allowed, but or in some cases they may be because a vet deems it necessary for that period of time. So I'm just wondering how we would be dealing with those and in terms of how we would be update the bylaw. What it would be the process to bring these forward, sort of thing, if they become an issue.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So this would be the perfect question for Carly. So hopefully she does return back. From what I do know is all of these issues that you've just raised were part of the review process with not only Carly, but Mr. Fraser, Ian Fraser, who also works for the animal shelter. And during the legal review, so during the drafting of the bylaw, there was a few revisions done, and he had input into all of that, and those concerns were raised. With the enforceability and the way the wording was drafted, it was decided to go with what the lawyer had thought would be the best wording when it comes to enforcement matters, as they would be the best ones to understand what would be the most enforceable. And when you write a bylaw for every single scenario, you can then narrow your scope of what's enforceable and what's not. And one thing for council to remember, and as you know, all of our bylaws are complaint-based, and Carly is back. So our complaint-based bylaws, so they're not proactively enforced. So when and if there is a complaint, for example, a leash requirement, when there's an issue or an incident has occurred, if that language isn't clear or spelled out, then it's not as easily enforceable and legally enforceable. So Carly, I'm glad that you're back. Councillor Bonner has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes. So Councillor Bonner has a question for you.
Did you hear my original?
Sure.
Did you hear my original question?
If you wouldn't mind repeating it, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll never be able to repeat it word for word. My comment is that your organization has been actively involved in helping produce this bylaw in terms of input has been received from you on and updates have been changed, that sort of thing. My question to you is the animal control organization, do you feel confident that this bylaw can be utilized by your organization to implement? Do you feel that you have all the opportunities available to you through this bylaw to enforce, to do the work you do?
I do, yeah. In fact, the bylaw that we're currently working with now is actually quite painfully inadequate, and we've sort of gotten used to that. So an opportunity for improvement is very welcome, and I think we have hit the most important points in terms of welfare standards, provision for cats, the removal of the breed-specific legislation, as well as closing several gaps that are existing in the current bylaw. So sort of as Leon said earlier, I don't know that it would be possible to have 100% consensus among everybody who has an opinion about this, because there are so many opinions. But I think this is a really good compromise on everyone's behalf. And I do have my utmost faith in staff when they say that if we do run into issues, we can look at amendments and go through that process. That's what we've been assured, and I feel confident that that's what would happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions for the delegation? Thank you, all three of you, for making yourselves available tonight. Very kind of you. Should you ever anticipate a career in politics, you know what Monday nights look like now. All right, Council, we have two options in front of us. Does anyone care to make a motion?
It's bylaws, so it has to go, yeah.
Well, we do have two options, actually,
I'm moving one.
set out in the report. One is to pass the bylaw.
Yeah.
I'd like to move the recommendation to pass the bylaw.
So your worship, that would require, through you to Councillor Armstrong, could you, if you wanted to read out then the motions, the bylaws then?
Sure.
Sorry, just if option one is what council's going with, then it would require.
Normally, we have the acting mayor do that, so we'll get Dawn to do it. Dawn, can you do it? You're the acting mayor.
Protocol would require that normally.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion that the Animal Responsibility Bylaw 2021 number 7316 to include provisions for animal welfare, control, licensing, duties of animal owners, penalties, and enforcement pass first reading.
And we have a seconder in Councillor Armstrong. No debate on this one, the first reading. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. We have the second reading.
Motion that Animal Responsibility Bylaw 2021 number 7316 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Councillor Thorpe, pardon me, Councillor Armstrong, did you wish to speak?
For me, I think this is an excellent bylaw when you have the Veterinarians Association supporting it, the SPCA, Catnap Society, all support that we're getting from the experts in the field. It's past legal review. I think it's excellent, and I feel, as I heard from Carly, that if there are issues, it will be brought forward back to staff, then will come forward to us for possible amendments if required. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting this bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I share the views of Councillor Armstrong, and it may seem to viewers that we are moving on this very quickly, but in fact, we've had lengthy discussions over this bylaw, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. So my thanks to Ms. Robertson and staff for their work in preparing what, as Your Worship, I think mentioned earlier, has been a fairly contentious bylaw. But although we know it won't keep everybody happy, as I've mentioned before, I think it is very reasonable. I think it's moderate. I think it's based on best practice from other communities. And I think it's really important for our listeners to note that it's not a case of the city wanting to go out there patrolling to chase down their cats. This bylaw is complaint driven. So that if a problem situation does arise, we have the tools that our bylaw officers can work with to hopefully deal with it. And I also want to point out that this bylaw, I think, serves to try and protect the interests and the safety of the animals in our community. And I heard just this past weekend of a person's cat running out on the road and got hit and killed, and it was a tragic situation. Very traumatic. So I think this tries to protect animals, and it's not meant to punish people or to take away their companion animals. It simply encourages responsible pet ownership. That's what it's all about, and that's why I will certainly support it. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, I have a question regarding limits on animals, number 7, A, B, and C, and 9.1. And my question is the one about number C, 6 companion animals. And I read what the definition of companion animals, and it pretty much appears to cover everything. So my question is 7A, you can have 12 small flock birds or domestic mice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's already over the 6 companion animals. Am I missing something? Or?
Ms. Robertson.
Thank you, through your worship. Actually, it's interesting because companion animals really boils down to dogs and cats.
Oh, okay.
So in speaking with the lawyer, I actually queried her on that, and she said, well, you just never know where there might be that's something that we haven't thought of. And that's why you see the specificity as it relates to flock birds or guinea pigs or reptiles. We looked at, in consultation with all the stakeholders, is what was reasonable for birds. we came up with the dozen. The 6 guinea pigs or reptiles or combination thereof. But yeah, it's really dogs and cats as a companion animal.
That's fine.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question for staff, but it's with great uneasiness, I have to say, that I've supported this bylaw to this state. Those that know me know animal rights is kind of near and dear to me. So I'm just curious, because I don't think there's any easy answers here, and I do think there's a lot that improves in this bylaw. But my question through to staff is, when we do that check-in or that review, will we have a level of consultation that goes out again to the community around bang the table or whatever? Just wanting to know what that future process might look like.
Ms. Robertson.
Again, it would certainly depend on what clause was going to be changed. I mean, obviously, the most significant ones,
Speak up a
the
little bit.
significant
Yeah.
ones would have that type of community engagement. If it's a simple tweak of a wording for an enforcement provision, I don't see that would require necessarily the bang the table consultation. However, every amendment to a bylaw has to come back to council, and certainly you can make a determination at the time when the bylaw comes forward to you for consideration. If you felt there was that extra level of requirement for community engagement, you could so direct that at the time.
Well, Your Worship, I don't know if I've incorrectly have this perception, but I thought, sorry, the promise to return council policy, I'm wondering, okay, so what does that totally look like? I thought that might be like a review, go out there, find out what's working. If there's unintended consequences, how are we going to gather that data?
I'll see if I can answer the question. The policy would be for 2 years, where in fact we're, as per the committee's direction, is just to not penalize anybody provided their cat has got proper identification, has been sterilized. It would be simply a promise to return. It gives that period of time for people to adjust to the bylaw. At the time that the 2 years would be up, it would certainly come back before council to see what the next steps would be. Would council like to continue on having that enforcement or the promise to return policy, or would you then like to ease into the provisions of the bylaw as they are stated today?
Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this bylaw. Most of that is based on conversation with Ms. Robertson, and I want to thank you for your deep research on this complicated topic. What I've come to understand regarding the roaming cats issue is that there is no requirement for leashes. There is no requirement for indoor animals. It's simply setting up the structure for if there is a nuisance animal or a feral population that needs addressing, this bylaw is going to allow us the structure to do that.
That's correct.
And so the portrayal, and what I heard a lot of in email and from residents, is this worry that we're going to keep cats from roaming. And I just want to be very specific. This is not about leashing cats. This is not about keeping cats inside. This is about setting up mechanisms and structures in order to support animal health for animals that are either they don't have a home or they're creating a nuisance, and the nuisance isn't resolvable between neighbors. Then we have some next steps to take based on this bylaw.
That's correct. And I believe, Carly, if you had any additional comments as it related to enforcement provisions, but well, Carly, were you wanting to say something on that? I see your finger waving in front of the.
Sorry, I'm having hard, that my audio's cutting in and out. I actually can't quite hear really what's going on. I don't know if that's on my
Not just you, Carly, actually all of us, we can't hear. We can only hear every few seconds.
Yeah.
Mercury retrograde. Sorry, the way you conveyed it is exactly the intent of what the bylaw is about.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you. I'm not going to support this on second reading. I had hoped to see this returned to the GPC for various reasons. I think given the desire, I think, to have the community at least generally supportive of the changes we're making. I'm not convinced that general support is there yet, and I think deferring it to the GPC for further consideration would be the best course of action. I'm not going to make a motion for deferral, however. I can read council. I think the vote is relatively clear that the expectation is that we will pass it tonight and make changes later if in fact public reaction and the experiences of those enforcing it and the community require it. So the motion is second reading. All those in favor? Councillors Armstrong, Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Thorpe, Brown, Bonner, and Turley. Opposed? Myself. Councillor Bonner.
Motion that Animal Responsibility Bylaw 2021 number 7317, number 7316 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw.
A motion that fees and charge amended bylaw 2021 number 7041.02 to add animal control fees pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next, Councillor Bonner.
Motion that fees and charges amendment bylaw 2021 number 7041.02 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Bonner.
Motion that fees and charges amendment bylaw 2021 number 7041.02 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
And third one?
Yeah.
Promise to return.
Sure, okay. Motion that council adopt the animal responsibility promise to return council policy as attached to the February 1st, 2021 report by the Deputy City Clerk.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Before we pass that motion, for the benefit of those who are watching carefully tonight, Ms. Robertson, would you care to come down to the mic and just explain what that policy essentially means, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. The proposed promise to return policy, and it's also noted in the bylaw, so this is just gives the community added assurance that for the next 2 years, so effective to January 2023 until revisited by council once again, that anybody's cat who is found running at large would not be penalized provided that your animal has identification and is spayed. It would simply come over to Carly and we'd make arrangements to either have the animal picked up free of charge, or if they don't have any way to come and pick up the cat, then the NIMO Animal Control would gladly deliver the pet back to them. This is about awareness and education, and we recognize that these are very new provisions for cat owners. There's been no enforcement to date, and not unlike the dog policies that were in 30 years, it does take some time to adjust, and therefore this is a start to go along that path of education, and then we would revisit again in a 2-year time period.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. I think it's very important before council votes on this that the public and the media who are covering this have as much understanding of what is intended by the passage of the bylaw and the promise to return policy, lest the public have an incorrect impression of what the intention is. Seeing no further debate, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next is item B, development permit application number DP 1195-3500 Departure Bay Road. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. As you mentioned, this is a development permit application for the subject property. Your Worship, it is an aquatic development permit. In this case, the applicant is seeking a variance request from 15 meters to 5.99 meters.
Ms. Gurry?
Seems like we have you on loop, Your Worship. Sorry, Your Worship, as I was saying, the development permit includes a variance from 15 meters to 5.99 meters. Sorry, 5.99 meters, which is just over 9 meter variance. There is an existing single-family home and detached building on the property, which the applicants are proposing to replace. That existing home is 1.2 meters away from the current top of bank. If the application is approved as presented, the new home will be sited 10 meters from the high water mark of Joseph Creek, which is a tributary to Departure Bay. Now, I know you have some delegations that are with us, I believe, this evening. Certainly happy to answer any questions either before or after the delegations, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. We should have Jamie Kuhn, project consultant, Pheasant Hill Homes Ltd. Or pardon me, Councillor Turley, you got a question already.
Yeah, just one of clarification on a definition. What is a net zero ready home?
Thank you.
Well, Your Worship, Mayor Krogh and Council, this is Ken Connolly. Can you hear me all right?
If yes, we can, but it's not quite your turn yet. But thank you. Councillor Turley's got a question to Mr. Lindsay, and then I will get to you. Sorry, my fault.
Okay.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and maybe the applicant was going to jump in with their definition, but in very general terms, it's a home that produces as much energy as it uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions. Mr. Kuhn, the floor is now yours. Please, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. And I will let you know it if you've got one, when you're down to 1 minute. Appreciate it.
Okay, so it's Ken Connolly here. Jamie has registered for us, but I'm going to be the one speaking. So good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Krogh and members of council. Thank you for hearing our application. Our goal here is to build what we would anticipate would be probably the most sustainable home in Nanaimo. We've got some slides. Could we have the next slide go up in that? Is that possible? Okay, yeah, next slide. So this is the proposed home. It's designed to be a net zero home. That is to have no net load on the grid. The homeowners are committed to driving 100% electric vehicles. They're very excited about the opportunity this site provides for food production, which was a key driver for locating the home where we are locating it, where we hope to locate it, so that we can preserve the area at the back of the lot for on-site food production. And then the other goal is to restore damaged habitat around the stream. And I'll talk about that more later. Next slide. So you'll probably all recognize this. This is the only certified passive house project in Nanaimo that I'm aware of. And passive house and net zero building are like sisters. They're just virtually identical programs, slightly different metrics. But the idea is that a home of this type would use about 15% of the energy that a normal home would use. So the demand on the grid goes from, say, $2,000 a year in utilities down to $300. And in the case of a net zero home, even that use is offset by renewables, typically solar panels. Right. So next slide, please. So here's passive house or net zero building kind of in a nutshell. You build a very good envelope. You'll notice proportionally thicker ceiling, wall, and floor assemblies here, better insulation, far better windows, and a superior air management system in the house. And then the house is, part of the system is to rely on low angle winter sun to be admitted, the heat from that to be admitted into the house in the winter. And of course, the house to be shaded appropriately in the summer so that you don't incur air conditioning costs and strain on the grid in that regard. Next slide, please. This is a net zero home we built in Comox, and the owners did monitor carefully their power consumption over a 1-year period. I was only a year and a half old now, but after 1 year, they were absolutely net zero. So no load net zero on a net basis on the grid. So quite an achievement. very comfortable, good-sized home. Next slide. This is a home we built in the CVRD. This is about 1,700 square feet and is built to passive house standards. Again, highly efficient. In this case, there's a wide open exposure to the sun. So we had to design the overhangs accordingly in order to again, minimize cooling costs. So far, indications are that we will not need air conditioning in this house, but we've got to give it a little more time to really establish that. So the trend is that by the year 2032, our building codes across Canada will require that we build homes to this level, to the passive house level or net zero level. And that's where we're headed. There hasn't been a great uptake in Nanaimo, unfortunately.
1 minute
as I
left.
say, I don't know of any other certified homes for a passive house standard or net zero performance that we or any other builders have built. So that's why we're excited about this project. Next slide. So you'll see here the existing house footprint on the lot and the proposed new house. And you'll notice that the existing house is much closer to the creek. We're moving the new house away from the creek. And you'll also notice the increased kind of green hatched areas to the north of the creek. Those are areas where we'll be restoring about 1,440 square meters of riparian zone, removing invasive species, and just generally restoring the natural environment there. The net increase in the size of the building footprint within the riparian zone is 5.15 square meters.
Could you wrap it up, please? Your 5 minutes are up.
Okay, that's really about it. We're just asking for that 50 meters of 5 meters of added space, and we're restoring a lot of habitat, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the delegation, Councillor Brown?
Thanks so much, Your Worship. One more out of curiosity than relevant to the development permit, but with the discussion on the passive house standard, with hydro as our back end, it's relatively clean for a GHG perspective. So I do think it's important that we strive for passive house and those type of standards. But I'm just curious. I assume there will be hot water and things like that. Will it be solar heated or hydro heated, or how would that be heated? Because I just note that our building stock, the GHG emissions is increasing due to the use of Fortis gas.
Yeah, the options for us are to heat. Sorry, the audio is breaking up. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'll just plow ahead then. The options are for us to use natural gas for an on-demand water heater or an air source heat pump for heating the hot water. Solar thermal panels that you refer to are generally not considered as efficient as using other forms of heat pumps for heating hot water. Solar thermal has virtually disappeared from the market.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for this delegation? Seeing none, the next is Mr. Peter Wojciech, the property owner. Mr. Whitehick, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, very good, thank you. You will have 5 minutes. When you've got 1 minute left, I will tell you you've got a minute left and ask you to wrap up within the 5 minutes total if possible, please. So proceed, you've got 5 minutes. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Your Worship, Councillors, my name is Peter Wojciech and I'm the owner of 3500 Departure Bay Road, along with my wife, Rebecca. I'm here to speak to our horticultural goals for our property. Gardening is important to my wife and me. I lived in Edmonton for 20 years before moving to Nanaimo, and for many years maintained a 20 square meter garden with a 6 square meter greenhouse at my residential property within the city of Edmonton. The reason we moved to Nanaimo was because I wanted to further my horticultural knowledge, and I enrolled and completed the Horticultural Technician Certificate Program at VIU. I had also grown tired of living somewhere where it may snow quite literally any day of the year. The smell of thawing tomato plants and lettuce plants is unpleasant, and unfortunately something I'm all too familiar with. When it came time to look for property, we were torn between land out in the ALR and something more residential that would mean less driving for the rest of my family. My wife works for the Symphony, and we have 2 kids, aged 3 and 5, just entering the school system. 3500 Departure Bay Road was nearly the perfect property for us, with its flat, sunny backyard with good soil, easy access to downtown for my wife's job, and nearby schools for the kids. Our garden plan is for 80 square meters of growing space, adequate to provide enough fruit and vegetables for a family of 4. Our house plans include a rainwater collection system to be used for garden irrigation, as well as a cold storage room in the basement to preserve our produce well into winter. And I look forward to bringing my many years of gardening experience and training to our new property. One other aspect of this project is the proposed riparian restoration required to offset our development. This restoration would come at significant cost to us in time and money. I appreciate some councillors might be against any and all development in riparian areas to preserve them as an animal's population density increases. I have 2 points to this. The first is that our development covers 21 square meters in the DPA, but we would be required to restore 1,440 square meters, again, at our cost. This saves the city money, not only to perform the initial work, but also in maintenance, as we will be motivated to not lose out on our initial investment. The second point also touches on maintenance. Invasive species don't care about property boundaries, and due to the significant cost, we would be further motivated to work with our neighbors to reduce or remove invasives on their property and replace them with native species. We have already had directed inquiries from 3 neighbors about what they should do, how they should do it, and who they should talk to. These neighbors are at 3506 Departure Bay Road, 3136 Granite Park Road, and 3198 Singleton Road. We would be highly motivated to remain good stewards for the creek, not just on our property, but in the neighborhood. This concludes my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? No questions for the delegation. Councillor Martman?
Thank you. My understanding when I read this is there's a building that's going to be torn down that is actually more in the riparian area than the new house that you will build. So in all the information I look at, I see this as actually being an improvement to the area. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We like to think so, yes.
All right. If there are no further questions for the delegation, thank you very much for taking the time to appear tonight. Oh, Councillor Bonner, sorry, last minute.
Thank you. I wanted to know where you got your movie poster from. The movie's not even out yet.
That's not a movie poster. That's a poster for a video game that I worked on.
Oh, okay.
There you go. The question was answered. Then to the delegation, thank you very much. Councillor Bonner, are you going to make the recommended motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. Motion that council issue development permit number DP 1195 at 3500 Departure Bay Road with the following variance. Reduce the watercourse setback measure from the top of the bank of Joseph Creek from 15 meters to 5.99 meters for the proposed dwelling.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had an opportunity to chat more in depth with the property owner, and I really appreciate the effort and intent that went into building a sustainable urban homestead, and I think that's quite commendable. Torn on this decision, actually. However, I think all this wonderful stuff that's being proposed could have been accomplished outside of the watercourse setback, and you know, the reasons being given to to allow the variance was to have the shading of the trees to reduce solar gains. That can be accomplished with building design changes that you don't necessitate trees. And the garden space is quite sizable. And I think that design again and location and potentially maybe splitting it up as opposed to being in a straight square could have been accomplished. And so I don't see the justification in this opportunity where we have a redevelopment and we have the opportunity to set a house outside of the water course to necessitate having it inside. And I think that although it's an improvement from what was before, I think that the standard has been set so low in how we treat water courses that that's usually the justification given for, when we do something but not quite all the way. And I just feel that we're losing out on an opportunity that comes up once in 50 years to redevelop a site that's, non-conforming on a water course, to set it back so that piece by piece we can restore and regenerate these very important features in our natural landscape. So I unfortunately cannot support the proposal as it is. I really appreciate the intent behind it. And as we go further, I hope that we can sort out how we go about with the development approval process so that we can optimize and maximize our opportunity to protect these water courses before a proponent goes through a year process of an application and putting a lot of thought and design that it doesn't get this far, because I know it's a lot of money an investment to get this point. So thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
I'll be voting in favor. He's got provincial approval. It says in our report that it reduces the impacts of the SPCA, and it also there's an improvement for the quality of the fish and wildlife habitat within the riparian lead strip. If we don't approve this, there's a good chance he could just go and do remedies at the whole, like just not rebuild, but just do improvements to the house there, which isn't going to solve any purposes. So for me, what he's proposed makes far more sense than if he was to go in and just redevelop the property as it is where it sits now, which he could do by getting permits to improve the quality of the house. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Been here before. I'm going to vote in favor of this project, and though not related to the DP, I hope the builders and the applicant will consider an electric hot water tank rather than relying on liquid natural gas. Thanks.
Thank you. I am fairly familiar with this property because it's not far from where Sharon and I have lived for what will be 38 years this April. And I remember this property when Mr. Bing, I believe, had it and had ponies on it, which is something you don't forget because your kids never pass by without having to say hi to the ponies. I took the opportunity the week before last to just go out there by myself so I wouldn't be influenced by the owner or the developer or anybody else, and spoke to the tenant who's going to lose their home, in fairness, and is conscious of that, but is somewhat excited, I would say, by the prospect of what's going to happen to the property. I must say, if you actually look at the land itself, I wouldn't say it's a dead zone, but the riparian area itself is not far from it. So I'm going to support this, not just because this is a tremendous step forward in building this kind of home, a private home in Nanaimo, but it will increase local food production, which is consistent with council's views, consistent with the donut model. It's consistent with everything that we've expressed about what we want this city to be and become. I'm going to support it not for any of those reasons, although they're all supportable, but because it will represent an improvement, a significant improvement to the riparian zone, and will, I hope, provide a model for other builders and people with respect, and no disrespect intended by saying this, with people of means who have the opportunity to lead the way in building the kind of housing that supports a vast reduction in our carbon footprint. So I'm going to happily support this one. If I've inspired anyone, speak now. Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Everyone in favor, save Councillor Gesselbrock. Thank you very much. Motion carries. The next is development permit application number DP 1173-1421 Princess Royal Avenue. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this is a form and character development permit for a 16-unit development on the subject property. I would say that both this and the next item on your agenda are similar in that they are properties that have single-family homes on them today, but have for many years, if not decades, been zoned for exactly this type of use as sort of a medium-rise infill development. And we're slowly seeing these areas that have been zoned for many years starting to transition with these infill projects. So with these infill projects, and especially on sites with slope and grade, there's always historic challenges, challenges on the sites, and this property is no different. You have a number of variances included in this development permit, and the vast majority of which I would describe as either related to the slope or related to the underground or under building parking structure. The exception would be the setbacks along the rear elevation, which are a setback reduction from 10.5 to 7.35 meters. There are renderings of the building in your package. It's attachment F. If those can be brought up on the screen, it might give yourselves or those at home a sense of the proposed building that's being proposed. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, Your Worship. Sorry, I did want to mention there's a parking variance to reduce small car parking from 40% to 50%. And what that means in terms of hard numbers is there's 22 spaces that are required under the bylaw. All will be provided under the building, and 11 will be our small car standard, 11 will be regular car if council approves the variance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I did have a question or two to Mr. Lindsay, and one is as much for the benefit of our viewers as myself. The variance regarding parking and small cars. Could you just clarify for everybody listening, what is our definition of a small car or small car space for parking as opposed to a normal car or a large car or a truck?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't always do a good job of guessing what council questions might be, but tonight I thought this one might come up, so I did jot down some notes. So a large parking stall is 2.75 meters by 5.8 meters, and a small car stall is 2.5 by 4.6 meters. So flipping to Imperial, you would have about 10 inches narrower and about 4 feet shorter for a small car stall.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. I'm gonna measure my car after we're finished. I also wanted to ask about the traffic egress. When I visited the property, I noted the lane down the, I guess it would be the northern side of the property, which is very narrow right now. I understand it's proposed to be widened. And then, am I understanding correctly that all of the traffic from the underground parking would come out onto Princess Royal Street or Avenue?
That's correct. Can I get that, the attachments F pulled up again if possible? Yeah, the top left image is probably the best. So there's, the lane is running up the hill from left to right in that image. All the parkade access will be off of that existing lane, and there has been widening to accommodate that access. There still will be the ability, my understanding is still the ability for two-way traffic on that lane, but certainly the preferred access will be towards Princess Royal.
Thank you.
Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is such a sweet little house that's going to be torn down if this goes. And I'm just acknowledging that. It's a sweet little home in an old neighborhood. Regarding some feedback we've had on this development, and this applies to both this and the next agenda item, we're often, we receive critique that neighborhoods or communities don't get enough opportunity to have their say on development, development permit applications. Thank you. So can you just walk through what is the process? Where are people's points of, where can they ask questions? How does that happen?
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I think that's a really important question. And we also get feedback from staff often about, well, especially where these applications, these form and character applications include variances, people often question, well, why didn't I get notified? Because of course, if it's a rezoning application, we notify property owners. If somebody comes in for just a straight variance application under the provincial legislation, we're required to notify. But there is no provincial requirement that if you're a variance within a form and character, that same notification has to occur. So there is no formal notification that's done to neighboring properties as part of development permits. We, as practice, notify the neighborhood associations in the area and make them aware that applications have submitted. It is a topic, and you have what's called your procedures and notification bylaw. It's a council bylaw that administers how we go about our procedures of notifying the community on various types of applications. It has been reviewed in the past, but it has been a number of years since it was last reviewed. It is on staff's work plan for 2021 to review the bylaw. I would note that some of the internal discussions we've had, for example, is in other communities, it's very common you'll see signs up for development permits. So there's a form of development permit, there'll actually be a requirement to put a sign up on the property. Some communities require notification. So that's something that staff would like to review and bring back to council, because we certainly understand those questions.
I think that would be a good idea, given that this is a critique that is lobbied against us, I think, almost every time. So, thank you.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. Motion that council issue a development permit number DP 1173 at 1421 Princess Royal Avenue with the following variances. Reduce the minimum front yard setback from 6 meters to 1.5 meters. Reduce the minimum north side yard setback from 3 meters to 0.45 meters. Reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 10.5 meters to 7.35 meters. Reduce the minimum front yard setback for an underground parking structure from 1.8 meters to 1.5 meters. Increase the maximum allowable combined height of a fence and retaining wall in the side and rear yard from 2.4 meters to 3.3 meters. And increase the maximum allowing percentage of a small car parking from 40% to 50% and a partridge in a pear tree.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Brown, including the partridge? Not including the partridge. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? None. Thank you very much. Carries. The next is development permit application number DP 1154-475 Stewart Avenue. Mr. Lindsay, and then we have 4 delegations.
Your Worship. Your Worship.
Sorry.
Just like to recuse myself on this one. I have a relationship with the immediate neighbor and also with someone on the development team.
Councillor Brown, thank you very much. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I was mentioning with the previous application, this is also what we would describe as an infill application on a historic property that it has had for, again, many years, if not decades, zoning in place for medium density infill. And this is a case, again, where an existing single family home is being proposed to be removed. And this proposal is actually for a 6-unit stacked townhouse development. Again, there are a number of variances with the application. And again, many of them are related to the underbuilding parking portions of the site, with the exception of the rear setback, which is 10.5 to 5.3 meters. Your Worship, I'm not going to go into much more detail because I know with one of your delegations you have the actual architect, the applicant, and I suspect they're going to walk through their proposal with you, but certainly happy to take any questions either now or after you receive the 4 delegations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. I don't see any questions for you at this point. So the first delegation is Nancy Mitchell, Newcastle Community Association.
Ms. Mitchell, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you. So you have 5 minutes. I'm not sure if you heard the mayor, but you have 5 minutes and he will let you know when you have 1 minute left. If you have video, I know you can't see us, but
No.
okay. Thank you.
All right, are we ready to go then? Ms. Mitchell, welcome. Please proceed. Ms. Mitchell, are you proceeding?
I'm proceeding if I could.
If you were speaking, we didn't hear you, and if you're showing slides, we didn't see them, so.
I'm here.
Okay. Are you ready to start then? Ms. Mitchell, can you hear me?
Okay, I'm still here, but I can't see you.
Yeah, we don't have two-way Zoom, Ms. Mitchell. So yeah, you won't be able to see us, but you can hear us. So please proceed.
I am proceeding.
Thank you, please.
So there seems to be a bounce around echo here. So I probably will get, yes, I am ready to start, but I'll probably get out of the council meeting. I'm Nancy Mitchell. Yes, I can hear you. And I'm trying to get started.
Oh, Nancy, I think you have your live stream on and there's quite a delay. So if you could not pay attention to the live stream and just listen via the Zoom.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, so you can hear us and you can please proceed now and just listen to the voice through the Zoom call, and that would be better because there's a delay with the live stream.
Okay, well, it's unfortunate that I don't get to see you, but thank you, Your Worship and Council. I would rather be there in person. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Just in response to Dale Lindsay's comments on the other application, from Newcastle's perspective, we do obviously support transition with infill projects. We're probably one of the densest communities in the whole of Nanaimo, but they also need to respect our zoning requirements and our neighborhood plan. We just allowed, for example, a 15-unit apartment building at 145 Stewart, which we didn't object to the construction. All we asked for was a gate at that time so that we could have some safety and security of the residents and the public in that garage. We are asking, with respect to 475 Stewart, that council deny this development permit application for three reasons. First is the issue of the proposed variances. If these variances are approved by City Council, it will set a damaging precedent for the entire neighborhood. The whole of Newcastle will now be under siege with similar proposals that push the boundaries of our zoning requirements. The applicant is asking for a 60% reduction in the required side yard setback on the south side and almost a 50% reduction in the rear yard setback. These are above and beyond what might reasonably be expected in the way of a variance. We have to ask how far council is prepared to push back against the community's guidelines for development. When does a variance become, in fact, a request for rezoning of a property? The second issue for us in this application is that of design. At the meeting of the Design Advisory Panel in September 26, 2019, the applicant was asked to review the Newcastle Brecon Neighborhood Plan and confirm the project meets its guidelines in principle. The neighborhood plan has all kinds of design guidelines relating to constructing neighborhood-friendly compatible infill, which have not been respected in this proposal. None of the units, for example, actually face Stewart Avenue. The only eyes on the street are two porthole-type windows on the second floor. The applicant has stated that it was not feasible to provide street-oriented units with a single driveway access from Stewart Avenue. We would argue that it is definitely possible to provide this kind of units on this size lot and in a manner that respects the adjacent residences and the guidelines of the plan. This has been done successfully, for example, at 559 Stewart with its 3 units of sensitive infill. So the question of lack of feasibility in this situation, therefore, is an economic one and not planning related. The last issue we wanted to bring your attention to is reporting to council about feedback obtained from neighbors with regard to this application. The staff report notes that consultation with neighbors has occurred on this project and that changes have been made to better respect the privacy of the neighbors. Unfortunately, the only neighbors specifically consulted by the applicant about the design were the ones directly to the north of the proposal. As a result of these discussions, revisions to the proposal have been made which have removed all the overlook and lack of privacy aspects of the design from the north side. Unfortunately, they've all been placed now on the south side. That property owner has not had any design discussions with the applicant, and he now bears the brunt of the proposed side yard setback reductions, plus the open patio in the upper level and a fourth floor setback, which is far below the minimum required in the neighborhood plan guidelines. As for the property owners to the west who face a 50% reduction in a backyard setback, they have also never been contacted by the applicant. For some, their first encounter with the applicant was a Zoom meeting that we actually had today at noon with the architects and the developer's agent, Steve Johnston. I myself sent comments to the city about this project in April 2020, but I don't see them reflected anywhere in the staff report. We know there is no statutory requirement for the applicant to undertake any consultation whatsoever, but for staff to take the applicant's information at face value and include it in a report to council is a bit disconcerting. This cannot continue. Relying on the applicant to inform the neighbors, relying on the local neighborhood association to be organized, or relying on the neighbors to keep up to date with what's building in Nanaimo are not effective consultation strategies. As we embark on the challenging stages of defining options and directions for Reimagine Nanaimo, we have to find new ways to ensure that residents of Nanaimo are not left out of council decisions. But that is for the future. Back in the here and now, we ask council to just say no to this development permit application for 475 Stewart Avenue. We can do much better and create a project that actually fits with the community and stays within the boundaries of the community guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on time. Questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Mitchell. The next delegation is Carolyn or Glenn Hallett. If we can get them online.
The challenging space to define options and directions for Reimagine Nanaimo. We have to find new ways to ensure that residents.
So, hi there, delegation.
We can do much better and create a project that actually.
I need you to turn off your live stream. It lags behind, so you won't be able to hear us appropriately with the live streaming on. Unfortunately, there's no two-way Zoom camera, so you'll have to just go with the audio that you're hearing from us right now.
Yeah, did you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I did turn it off. So.
Very good. And you're ready to go? You're Carolyn Hallett?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have 5 minutes. I will try and warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Okay.
So if you could, please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't really have a lot to say. I am in the 455 Stewart. So I am one house removed to the south of this development. I gonna pretty much go along with everything that Nancy said. I did submit a letter to council and the mayor, and basically stating that the design of the building doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood. The building, the variances that they're asking for are quite, invasive as far as I'm concerned. One thing that I read in the development permit was something about the garbage pickup. Now, in the permit, the developer stated that each unit would have
the green bin, recycling bin, and garbage in their unit. So each unit would have bins. To myself, putting out 12 bins on a collection day, I have really no idea where they're going to put any of them. So I don't think that that part of it was thought out very well. I'm not really happy with the fact that the trees in my neighbor's yard, who is the 465 Stewart, who is bordering this proposal, that he's, more than likely going to lose those trees because they want to dig down and put in parking. So really my concern is that I'm not against density, but I think there's too many units in this development. I don't think it was well thought out with respect to the garbage collection, and I would ask that council deny the application. I don't really have much to say other than that. So.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hallett. Any questions for Ms. Hallett from council? Seeing none, thank you very much. The next delegation is Raymond DeBeeld, the architect. Mr. DeBeeld, are you with us?
Mr. DeBeeld, can you hear us there? And if so, you might be on mute. I'm not sure.
Hello?
Mr. DeBeeld, you can hear us okay?
Who's there?
Mayor Krogh and council.
Oh, it's Raymond. I can't see anybody, and I was locked out until just now.
Well, don't worry about seeing us. You can watch us any night of the week or go on the city website. It's not that exciting, but it is important that we actually hear you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Fortunately, I was listening on my iPad on the side, but it's off now.
That's right. Yes. Just let me finish, please. You have 5 minutes. I think you're familiar with council process. At 1 minute, I'll tell you you've got a minute left. And so I'm going to start the timer now and you can proceed, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and council, thank you for having us. On behalf, I just want to talk about the background a little bit, the variances, the community consultation that we've had, changes as a result of the consultation, and the community benefit. And if I have some time, I'll talk about some of the questions I believe that staff has overviewed and maybe a little bit of what I heard, but only partial of what the other people have spoken about. 6-unit project was started in 2018. Despite what some people think, we did spend a lot of time on this project and we did consult with the neighbors and we've modified the building to deal with some of that. So unlike an apartment building, this is a condo project and residents do have stable invested interest in everything. The front of the building is quite dense in landscaping at the front and the back, including public art, and there's varied outdoor spaces that are minimal in scale, south facing, north facing, rear yard, front yard. So again, kind of COVID friendly kind of thing. I think the building does meet the design guidelines. It's always open to interpretation, and obviously it's not about style or color or anything like that. I mean, we have parking. We don't have any parking in the back or anything like that, and most of the building is really 3 stories that faces each the 3 neighbors or 4 neighbors. In the front, it's only front that's 4 stories. In terms of the variances, I'll be a little bit quicker. The lot coverage is 44%, but really the part that's above the parking, underground parking, is actually only 40%. It's just the offset, and part of the parking is only about 1 meter off the ground along the main entrance along the south side of the building. So it's kind of
not really unfair because we had to make the driveway wide enough. These lots are always tough to deal with. R8 even more so because it's really designed to be lots that are really like about 2.5, 2.25 times bigger than what this particular lot. And as you can see from the other lot at Princess Royal, it's very hard like that. We did a similar building, DP 1138, which at 602 Franklin Street was very similar to this, except the orientation of the lot was a little bit different. In terms of the rear yard setback, is a little bit smaller than normal, but again, I think you have to look at it's very densely landscaped and very residential in its nature. Again, only 3 stories. If we actually built a house without any side or rear yard setbacks, the building could be about 10 to 35% wider and be about 4 meters taller than we actually show. So it actually could be another story taller. Now, again, because of the underground parking, again, the bylaw and the neighborhood guidelines say we could have parking at the rear of the building as well. So again, the underground parking provides a lot more benefit in terms of not being able to see traffic. It should be a little bit quieter because it's basically walled all around. In terms of combined height and fence, I don't think anybody really has any issues to do with that. Again, that's mainly the result of the underground parking. In terms of community consultation, again, the team, I didn't personally go, but staff, obviously, we had lots of discussions with staff, again, since about 2018, 2019 with the project. It went through the advisory design panel, went to the neighborhood association or through the referral process. Again, I can't comment about whether that's appropriate or not in terms of the quality of that communication. Again, one of the project members of the project, as part of the team, had talked to the neighbors, tried to talk to the neighbors a few months back, and just recently as well, last week. Again, and I've had discussions with a neighbor on the corner lot myself personally as well. So we've had several different discussions that way.
1 minute, Mr. DeBeal.
Oh, no. Okay. I think it's fun because I can't see you all. So I think the comments say basically a lot of things that we said in terms of how things are changed. It's hard to see on some of the things, the guards, the railings and stuff like that. There's folding walls and screens and stuff. Even the neighbor overlooking the south is protected because of a solid guard rail, and there's a hedge on top or planting on top of that very top balcony. I won't talk about the community benefit. And in regards to the trees, we lifted the building up to not dig down deep into that. And I'm pretty convinced that we should be able to keep all the trees and everything. And we'll consult with that neighbor as well. So I don't think there's real concern about that. So I think I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Through to you, Mr. DeBeal. If you went from 6 units down to 5, would you then need a variance?
Not for the rear, but we probably wouldn't be profitable the building in order to build it because again, we've got the cost of underground parking for 3 structures, and to try and save the trees and other elements, I don't think it would be feasible. We looked at about 6 or 7 or 8 different schemes for the project.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to the delegation, if I may. In the minimum side yard setback, you're asking a variance of 1.8 meters. And in the report here, it says so that you can accommodate 2 full-size vehicles. I'm wondering why you chose to go with full-size vehicles when the majority of folks seem to be building parking lots for smaller size vehicles.
That's only because part of only about 1 meter or so of the building is over height or above ground. Otherwise, it's back to regular 3-meter setback, and then it's further setback on the top floor. So I don't think that's really a fair comparison. I think more room the better, right? People's garages are typically full of stuff, so.
Actually, I'm not sure that was my question. I just wanted to know why you decided to go with full-size vehicles instead of smaller vehicles for your parking.
It'll just, I guess, we just don't anticipate that not everybody will have 2 cars either.
Okay, thank you.
I think Councillor Bonner is basically saying, like most of us, vehicles don't see the garage much and it's for storage space, but on this occasion it's going to be for parking, I'm sure, given the area. Good question. Mr. DeVille, I don't see any other questions coming to you. Thank you very much. Our next delegation is Norm Soares. I hope I've pronounced it correctly. Mr. Soares, are you?
Hello?
Good evening, Mr. Soares. Are you on?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. You can hear us
You
okay?
hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. I don't know if you've been listening, but the drill is you have 5 minutes. At 4 minutes, I will tell you have a minute left to complete your presentation, and if you're ready to go, we'll start you off. So please proceed.
Yeah, I don't really have a presentation. I'm just concerned with the decking, I guess, on the 4 floors, and the trees on my side with the rooting, and also the fencing on the south side. I believe the north and the south are going to be set to 3.6, and I'd like mine set to the same as that. Yeah, my only concern is really with the trees and the liability of what's going to come with that once they start excavating. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Soares. I can't and won't give you legal advice tonight, but any concerns about liability, I'm going to suggest you can use the lawyer referral service. I think they only charge $25 or $30 for half an hour, and you'll be able to get summary legal advice on the issue, which might assist you.
Okay.
But we appreciate your comments, and safe to say that you're opposed to the development.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Worship. And recommendation is motion that council issue development permit number DP 1154 at 475
Stewart Avenue with the following variances. Increase the maximum lot coverage from 40% to 44%. Reduce the minimum yard setback from 10.5 meters to 5.3 meters. Reduce the minimum south side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.2 meters. And increase the maximum allowable combined height of a fence and retaining wall in the north side and rear yard from 2.4 meters to 3.6 meters.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Turley? Councillor Armstrong?
I'll be voting against this. I did a lot of thinking. I drove by and I looked. I think the variances are too much. I think that he could drop the building size down from 6 units to 5, possibly even 4, and still make a profit. Although I know we can't speak about design, I think design is terrible, but I know that's not part of this. The other big issue I have is that it doesn't conform with the neighborhood plan, which is huge for me. We're asking people to live in this area. And obviously, if he's building 3 bedrooms in the size, they're not going to be exactly cheap. So for me, I just can't go with the 16 to 50% variance. I think it's too great for the neighborhood to bear. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will also be voting not in favor of this. I had the same thought as Councillor Armstrong, actually. Really supportive of 3-bedroom units. I actually like the building and I like the orientation, but if the size is an issue, I don't know why 6. I mean, I heard the architect say that it's about profit, or but situating this the way it is, which is, I think is really unique, but pushing it off to the side to accommodate that single driveway really it requires a lot of variances, and I think they're just too great for me. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I'll concur with Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Armstrong. I say it's back to the drawing board. In my personal opinion, I think there's more work that can be done and that it can be more suitable for that neighborhood.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to confirm that one of the delegations mentioned concern over garbage cans. And my understanding from looking on the city website is because there is likely 6 units, the garbage will be picked up by a private hauler, not the city equipment. And my experience with the private haulers that I'm aware of, none of them have equipment similar to the city. They all have equipment where the driver has to get out, wheel the containers to the truck, and then they're lifted up and put into the appropriate bins. So parking with that is, if that's the case, is not a concern in my mind. So that might alleviate that particular person's issue, but Mr. Sims may want to say something on that. So.
Mr. Sims, please.
Where did it come from? I can answer if I know the site.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only just to say that Councillor Toure is correct.
Thank you.
Your Worship, could I just add to that very comprehensive response? Thanks for the question, because I just wanted to confirm. I think I think what was being anticipated by the community is that you'd have 12 bins lined up along Stewart Avenue, and because of its multifamily, that's not the case. So the design of this project, I'm not trying to convince council one way or the other, but just to answer the question, is the hauler would enter the site, come onto the property. The individual tenants would have garbage in their parking in the garages, and then they would bring them out in front of the units, but it wouldn't actually be on Stewart Avenue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm still getting over the acknowledgement that Councillor Turley was right. But that's great. What else is new? This project was a tough one for me, and I'm inclined at this point not to support staff's recommendation, which I don't like to do. When I looked at the property and the renderings, my impression was this size of unit was really being shoehorned onto this property, and I recognize that density is not an issue. Our zoning allows for that density, but it's a significant rear yard variance. And I guess, to be honest, and I mean no disrespect to Mr. DeBeeld, whose projects I usually like, I was not that impressed with the form of this building in that location, which is such a beautiful location. You know, looking across Stewart Avenue, hopefully looking across Stewart Avenue to the water. And this development, of course, is not able to take advantage of that, I think mainly because of its size. So I'm still open to hearing other comments from council, but at this point, I don't feel I can support it. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, with relation to this project, I get the sense that the property size is a bit too small for the size of the building, and it's requiring quite large variances. And for that size of variance, I think that is important that especially the immediate neighbors can have some input into the building. And sounded like that did happen on the north side, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, the communications didn't quite happen with the neighbors on the west and the south side. And I do think that is important, and maybe some design alterations could be made that folks could be a little bit okay with it. But with variances of that size, I think that more consultation is required. So I can't support this application as it is. Thank you.
I will be voting in favor of this for a number of reasons. Firstly, the zoning in the area is appropriate and it's been in place for a very long time. Secondly, staff have reviewed this very carefully and have recommended that council issue the development permit in accordance with the variances. The variances I do not find to be as significant as we have seen in some situations. These are, as Councillor Hemmons pointed out, larger units, family-oriented units in that sense, something we lack a great deal of in this community. Densification, for me, is important. I campaigned on the concept we would be densifying downtown as much as we reasonably could in the circumstances. This development is designed such that it does not require on-street parking, as is often the case, and which is, I know, is a continuing issue for Councillor Armstrong, but provides indeed 2 parking spots for each unit, which in the modern world, I would argue, is probably more than generous. And I appreciate the concerns of the existing neighborhood residents and all the people who live there. But I think it is abundantly clear by virtue of the zoning that this is an area that has long been slated for further densification. Will you get the perfect project on every property? Absolutely not. Somebody has to make some money on these. We are not building these units ourselves. These aren't public dollars. These are being built by private developers, and it's the only way it's going to occur. And I expect them to try and make a profit. And there is risk in this. And this, for instance, this project, as we understand it now, has been in the drawing board, so to speak, since they started approximately 2 years ago. I took the time on Friday to walk the site, having regard to the slope, the existing vegetation, the height of the building, and all of those other circumstances. I appreciate it may have some impact on the immediate neighbors. But at the same time, if we are to encourage family construction in this community in townhouse style or condominium style units, and we have 3-bedroom units proposed, and considering the zoning again, as I say, I think it is a reasonable proposal, notwithstanding. I appreciate it will not be popular with some of the immediate neighbors, but I was much moved by a letter I received from a neighbor nearby who said, basically living right on Townsite Road, that this she thought was an appropriate development for the neighborhood, and she obviously lives in a single-family dwelling. So in the circumstances, I'm going to support it. Are there any other speakers to this? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please raise their hands. Councillors Turley and myself, and those opposed, Councillors Armstrong, Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Thorpe, and Bonner. Motion is defeated. Ms. Gurry, I note we're past 9 o'clock, past the scheduled break. Unless I see great objection, we do have a bit of an agenda left still. Perhaps we'll take a 10-minute break then. Please, thank you. We'll reconvene at 9:25.
Our emergency routes, they are priority routes. They consist of roads that go to and from the hospitals, from the fire department stations, and from the BC ambulance stations. They're also their main commerce routes through the city of Nanaimo. So this allows commerce to happen during a snow event. So we hit those roads first. Once those are clear and open, then we move into the secondary roads, and then we move into residential areas, which are dead-end roads and cul-de-sacs. And it can take up to 96 hours before we get into the residential areas. One of the side effects of plowing snow is it does end up on the sidewalk, and this can be very frustrating for homeowners and business owners that have just cleaned the sidewalk. It also pulls into their driveways. The crews try to keep it as close to the curb as they can, but we need to open the road right up to the curb to allow the drains to be exposed for when the snow starts to melt.
So this is one of our larger winter maintenance vehicles. They're very versatile in that they can be equipped with a lot of our different pieces of equipment. Right now, this one has a front plow, a belly plow, as well as a salt or spreader box. We also have a brine unit that fits into this vehicle. This is the belly plow, and it's really good at removing hard-packed snow and ice. And then back up here to the front, we have what everyone is more familiar with. This front plow can push a lot of snow, so make sure that you slow down and keep your distance from the vehicles to ensure safety.
We have 17 vehicles that we use within the snow and ice operations for the city of Nanaimo. We also have an early shift that starts at 5 in the morning, and we have a night patrol, an afternoon shift, and an evening shift. They are eyes on the road, keeping us appraised of the conditions so that when the snow starts falling or ice starts forming on the roads, they can start salting and also call for other resources and mobilize the crews out.
this is one of the City of Nanaimo Public Works snow and ice control vehicles. And this is actually set up for a brining unit right now, or anti-icing. And what brine is a 23.3% sodium chloride solution. And it comes out of the spray bars down here at the bottom, and it's made here at the Public Works yard. It's a proactive method of snow and ice control, as when we know that there's a winter storm coming, we can actually lay this down on the road prior to the event.
By putting the brine down before the snow comes, it buys time, it lets us on the roads, and then when we hit it with the plows, it doesn't stick. The snow doesn't stick, it comes off much easier. Whereas if we didn't brine, the snow has an opportunity to freeze to the road.
So another benefit of the brining or anti-icing unit is that during the frosty mornings, we can have it drive down the road, and then immediately the frost disappears as they're applying the brine.
Brine's a great tool for us. It's very cost effective. We can stretch our hard-pressed tax dollars to the maximum. We can make brine for cents on the dollar.
So the other thing that we ask is that everyone stays back from these anti-icing or any winter maintenance vehicles, as they have limited visibility and it's poor conditions out there, and they're trying to maneuver around everything. So just stay back and give them a little bit of room to operate and clear the roads.
So here we are in the Public Works yard, City of Nanaimo, and what you look around, you can see our various tools that we use for snow and ice fighting. We have tandem trucks, 4x4 trucks. We have backhoes. All our trucks are capable of having front plows on them. And the larger trucks, we have belly plows on them as well. And they all have a salter sander that can be mounted on the back.
This is another tool in our winter maintenance fleet. It's a salting machine. And what happens is that the salt gets loaded into this hopper, and on this conveyor where it gets hit with these two saddle tanks, which are full of brine. Then it comes out here on the spreader. And why we add the brine is that it reduces the amount of spray from the salt. So it doesn't bounce nearly as far, saving about 20 to 30% of our salt. As well, by using the anti-icing liquid on the salt, the activation starts right as it hits the road.
The purpose of the salt is to keep the roads bare, keep ice from forming on the road. Again, safety for everyone, including ourselves and the public. That's why we put the salt.
Today we're talking about clearing catch basins or road drains on residential roads. The first thing to understand is where the catch basin is in proximity to your residence. When clearing a catch basin or road drain, we want to make sure that you make yourself visible and aware of oncoming traffic. When clearing snow or debris from a catch basin, we ask that you put it in an area where it will not plug the catch basin again, not placing it on an already shoveled driveway or sidewalk. Sandbags are available at 2020 Labio Road 24/7. Just remember to make sure you bring a shovel. The City of Nanaimo and Public Works appreciate your help in keeping your catch basins clear. Thank you.
On snow days like this, the City of Nanaimo sends out a fleet of plows. How well equipped are these trucks?
They're really well equipped. We all have plows and sanders on them. We come with a belly plow too, so we're well prepared once we get a big snow like this. A lot of waves, a lot of friendly faces. People are pretty happy when you come and rescue them and clear off their road. So on our maps to determine where we go, we follow our red routes, which are our bus routes and our major routes, and they're first. Then our secondary routes are in purple, followed lastly by our side streets, which are in yellow. we try not to cover a nicely shoveled driveway, but sometimes we don't really have an option, and it's unfortunate. We're not trying to do it on purpose.
In some cases, the plows can't scrape heavily packed or iced snow right down to the surface of the pavement. So how does it clear away?
We're taking off as much as we can, and we're putting lots of salt down to melt the rest. So sometimes it just takes a little bit longer, but it's usually pretty effective. Salting is really important because if we get it down like this, then roads won't freeze, and way safer for the drivers out there.
And in terms of safety and getting the job done, are there some challenges to plowing in Nanaimo?
Yeah, Nanaimo's got a lot of hills, a lot of narrow streets, cars parked on it. It can be pretty tough sometimes.
How can drivers parking on the side of the road in Nanaimo help?
Just make sure they're parked legally and as close to the curb as possible so we can widen the streets as much as we can. We don't always move very fast, but that's important to push the snow. So we really appreciate if people can give us a little bit of space. These are big trucks. We have salters going, spinning, and we're still on a lot of ice and snow. So when we try to go up a hill, if people are right behind us, it can be dangerous for everybody. So we appreciate everybody can give us some space behind us, and we'll give lots of space in front.
Hey, Tiana.
Hey.
It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Oh, yeah, buddy! Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Headshot!
Scalds from hot drinks are the leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, down in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
I'd like to call council back to order. The next item on the agenda is RDN Duke Point Sewer Service Amendment Bylaw. Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Worship. In contrast to the relatively simple report before you, it's really to provide some support to the regional district's bylaw for the Duke Point Sewer Service, because the city is a contributor and part owner of the sewer service. The proposed motion just essentially fixes a small typo or makes an adjustment to the map area within the regional district. So the regional district provides a sewer service to the Cedar area. North Cedar Improvement District is constructing a water treatment plant. They're authorized to connect to the regional district sewer at Duke Point. But at the time of the authorization, the map was not adjusted. So this provides support to the regional district.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Your Worship, motion that council consent on
Behalf of the electors of the Regional District of Nanaimo's adoption of Duke Point Sewer Service Amendment Bylaw number 1004.08, 2020, and that the regional district of Nanaimo be notified accordingly.
Seconded. Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
Did you get that?
The next is the Economic Development Strategy and External Corporation Charter. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to turn this over very quickly to Mr. Corson to run you through the report with this presentation. Before that, I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Corson's been the project lead on this now for many months, and just wanted to thank him along with Councillor Turley and Councillor Martman for their work on the task force, and we're pleased to be able to present that to you this evening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Corson, please.
Great. Thanks, Your Worship. So having reviewed the economic development strategy with council this evening and talk to you about the Economic Development Corporation that will help deliver some of the items in the strategy for you. So in terms of the overview, I'm just going to talk about the task force and its mandate and who was on it and the work that they did. We'll go over the economic development strategy and the process and the priorities and the vision and mission, some of the specific goals and strategies, and we'll talk about the charter itself and how that would operate, and then we'll talk about next steps with you. So the task force was created in late 2019, following a whole bunch of work that Mr. Nielsen did for us on review of the economic development function. And that review of the economic development function talked about economic development in the city of Nanaimo being provided by an in-house team, which is Ms. Manhas and a future manager, as well as the external agency. And through that, he had a series of recommendations, and all of those council have followed to this date. And one of those was to establish a task force which would oversee the creation of an economic development strategy and flesh out the details of the external agency. In terms of the task force members, I certainly want to thank all the leadership of Councillor Martman and Councillor Turley. Other members included Doug Backhouse, Chris Beaton, Kathy Carlisle, Jordan Green, Dave Devanna, Jason Michelle, Bob Moss, Erilyn Thomas, William Litchfield, Kim Smythe, and Andre Sullivan. And it was a very, very good group, very engaged group, and we were able to have, we had over 13 meetings to help kind of get us to where we are this evening to present this to you. So the strategy, like many of our corporate strategic documents, provides a guideline on how we can go forward with this file. This strategy is probably a little different than some other economic development strategies. It's broader and actually takes in, kind of acknowledges all the work the city does in terms of providing economic development, and it also brings in all our partners. So it's much more holistic a way of looking at economic development. The time frame for the strategy is a 3 to 5 year horizon, which is short, but hopefully will allow us to accomplish quite a bit in that short period of time. The strategy was developed in concert with some other important initiatives led by council, including the Mayor's Task Force. So you'll see a lot of that work has been incorporated. The Health and Housing Action Plan work has been woven into this as well. And then the Reimagine Nanaimo process was used to help solicit feedback from the public and to get some direction on priorities. The process itself involved the consultant doing a large data analysis to understand the current state of the economy in Nanaimo, and that's a separate standalone report that is available. We did focus groups with various leaders in the business community. We did some scenario planning. And one of those scenarios was to try to wrap our heads around the impact of COVID and what that meant for Nanaimo. There was a business survey, and then through Reimagine Nanaimo, we did the broader community survey, which gave us quite a large outreach, larger than you'd probably normally get through an economic development strategy. And then we had some workshops in the fall. And then we spent the last part of 2020 working on the actual strategy itself. And you'll probably remember we presented at the GPC on December the 14th. As all good strategies, we did a bit of a SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. I think all of us who live here know Nanaimo's strengths are certainly the environment and being a regional center for the island. Some of the weaknesses that were identified were some of the healthcare we have and opportunity for more telecoms. If we looked at the opportunity section of this, it's very interesting. I think there's just so much opportunity in Nanaimo. We identified the First Nations partnership opportunities. Certainly COVID has highlighted the opportunity for more remote workers coming to Nanaimo. The downtown and waterfront were also identified as key opportunities for us to build on. We reached out to the business community and through the business survey, as well as through Reimagine Nanaimo. We looked at goals, priorities, and sectors, some of our key goals. And the feedback we got were improving quality of life, making sure there's jobs for people, and focusing on economic growth. Priorities, people identified infrastructure as a top priority, business climate and business expansion as areas to focus on. And then sectors that were of interest were tourism, technology, and health. So the whole plan is set around 6 guiding principles, and I'll just quickly go through those. So the first one is partnerships, and I think you'll a reflection of our task force and the corporation, which we'll talk about later, is really about doing things together and being collaborative and inclusive. There was a discussion about focusing on local, so growing from within as opposed to focusing on bringing businesses in. Long term was about outcomes are optimal when they last, so making sure we do things that aren't just temporary but will actually be around in perpetuity. One of the issues that's come up in many of the previous economic development plans, and I think we see it quite often, is kind of the authenticity. And I like the language we used here. The strong sense of place will bring purpose and confidence. And I think that's quite an interesting statement. And then equity and reconciliation is important to this council. It's important to our community, and that's been woven into as a guiding principle. And then the circular economy was trying to capture some of our discussion around the donut economy, and it's a little bit broader than just about recycling. It's really about making sure everyone is whole and equal in this society. The plan itself is centered around 6 goal areas, which are economic capital, business development, human capital, innovation and technology, social and environmental capital, and then placemaking and attraction. And quite often, I think in an ag dev strategy, you see placemaking and attraction occupying a significant portion of the strategy. We certainly recognize it's important, but it's not the primary focus of this strategy. And what I'll do is I'll just take you quickly through each of these goal areas and the various actions that come out of them. And I won't go into every single one, but I think some of these are quite interesting for council. The economic capital section is really about infrastructure, and kind of I think a lot of the things on here are things that the city can control directly. And so, for instance, we have the idea of a community infrastructure plan. So it's not just an infrastructure plan for Nanaimo, but it's also recognizes the infrastructure needs for all our partners at the table, and it helps us do what we call the big ask. So we can actually go to our partners and say, this is really our top priority in the wider Nanaimo context. As part of our Reimagine Nanaimo process, we did a land inventory and capacity analysis, and employment lands was identified as a potential shortage going forward. And that's really important, obviously, from economic development, but also just from overall society to make sure we have areas where people can work. So that's a priority in the strategy to make sure we protect and identify their employment lands. Downtown and the waterfront is always critical, and that includes the redevelopment of downtown, Port Drive, the waterfront, Newcastle Channel, all those areas that are so important to Nanaimo's image. And then we talked about the broadband connectivity, and there's just so much opportunity with the TELUS Pure Fiber that's come to town. And I think recently we've talked about the Connected Coast, and we'll be coming back to talk to you more about that, which is another fiber optic opportunity for Nanaimo that we can take advantage of. And then the old healthcare is so important to our community, and we have many people that work in the healthcare sector, but we know we could do more with it. And I think Nanaimo is really starting to turn itself into a healthcare center of excellence, and there's more that we can do to harness that. So quite a few projects on economic capital, and then in terms of human capital, because obviously you need people to make things work, and this is all about linking educators and students and employers together, making sure we have social procurement that we talked about earlier, and making sure as the city grows, we're actually attracting the people that we need in the community to fill the positions we have. Social capital is probably not something you normally see in an economic development strategy, but I think it's very important in the Nanaimo context through the work we've done with Health and Housing Task Force and building on our relationships with Island Health, BC Housing, and the nonprofit sector, making sure that we're recruiting healthcare providers into our community and staff. And then, of course, in terms of Indigenous economic reconciliation, our relationship with Nanaimo and Sonanis, and making sure that we're having dialogue about how we can move the dial on that side of things. And I know Mr. Smythe at the Chamber has been doing a lot of work with Nanaimo on Indigenomics, and it's certainly something that we've included in the strategy. So business development is certainly something you quite often see in an ECDev strategy, and we've certainly included in here. As you know, Ms. Manhouse does excellent research and data analysis, and she'll be here in a few weeks to talk to you about her state of the Nanaimo economy. We're going to keep building on the research and data we collect. The free trade zone that Vancouver Island's been designated as something we can take advantage of with the Vancouver Island Economic Development Association. The positive business climate is something that we work on all the time in the city in terms of trying to help developers and investors. We've done work on home-based businesses recently, and I think the pandemic has showed us how important it is to be prepared for the uneventful events like the pandemic or wildfires or earthquakes. So it's something we want to make sure we're ready to address when they happen, unfortunately. Innovation and tech is an area that is actually the next item on the agenda, but talking about how we can harness the technology sector to improve things in Nanaimo. And some of the ideas in here are the idea of building more of a downtown tech hub, which in order to do, you need to have the infrastructure in place, which goes back to the first place, and then also partnering with all our shareholders. The innovation technology section also includes networking with existing businesses, building out that ecosystem, and looking at cluster development. And then the final sixth one is the traditional business attraction you would see, and investment promotion, making sure Nanaimo's investment ready, the branding of Nanaimo, and then having those champions of Nanaimo who go out and sell our city by giving positive messaging. So the immediate areas of focus that we have in the plan for you are obviously to set up this external agency. We'll talk about that in a minute. The passenger ferry has obviously been an important file for a decade now, and it remains a priority. And certainly the staff and all our partners in the community are keen to make that happen. Through Reimagine Nanaimo and our process with economic development, certainly social disorder and working with trying to help the city's vulnerable population is an important goal, and we're doing that with BC Housing and Island Health, but there's obviously more work to do with that. Port Drive and Waterfront Walkway are key projects in your strategic plan, and those we'll continue to work on those. Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Holm are working on the development process review for building permits, for commercial building permits. And I think Mr. Lindsay alluded to looking at our procedure bylaw as well to help improve processes as well. That's ongoing. And then with the Port Authority and Airport, there's an opportunity to kind of look at this idea of logistics hub and how that could bring more business opportunities here. So the plan has a whole implementation time frame. I'm not going to go through it all, but the consultants laid things out over the 3 to 5 year period, and that's there for your consideration. So that's the strategy. The task force endorsed the strategy itself. And the other thing council asked the task force to do was to develop a charter. And the charter is essentially the kind of the overall framework, the governance framework for how this corporation will work. And as I said before, we have an in-house economic development team that will work on some aspects, and then we'll have the corporation that will do the tasks that were kind of identified by Mr. Nielsen in his report. So in terms of the charter, I'm not I won't read this for you per se, but the mandate is to maintain and update the economic development strategy and make sure that that certain initiatives that attract business and employers to the community are being done, and help with that coordination piece lot of tie-in with the corporation and what we're seeing in the mayor's task force in terms of I think the leadership table, and in health and housing, we have the Council of Champions. So there's kind of a common goal here to have a group of people providing leadership at that level. And in terms of the other key elements, the corporation would be largely owned by the city, and the city would be what's called a Class A shareholder. And then we have 5 Class B shareholders, who are the airport, the Chamber of Commerce, the Port Authority, Sonoma First Nation, and Vancouver Island University. And they are actually owners. They invest into the corporation. And then we have, in terms of a board, there's 9 members on the board. So we have the 6, the city plus the 5, 1 member from the nonprofit social services world, and then 2 other that would be, there'd be a call for those 2 directors. In terms of funding, the city is putting in, we've allocated $300,000 a year at the moment, which is probably a bit low, but we don't want to, what we want to do is once the corporation's up and running, it can then develop a business case for council for next year once they have a little more certainty as to where they want to head themselves. And the Class B shareholders are each going to contribute this year $5,000 because it'd be about a half year. And then going forward, it'd be a $10,000 contribution each in cash or in kind. In terms of next steps, if council were to endorse these 2 elements tonight, then we would later in February have a meeting with the city and our Class B shareholders to get going on the corporation, and we'd want to start working out the letters of incorporation and developing the procedures, bylaws, etc. For the organization. We then come back to council for your sign off on that. As I also expect all the Class B shareholders would go back to their individual organizations and get approval from their governance bodies. Yeah, and then once that was done, then we'd be in a position to, I guess the corporation would be in a position to hire a person to be the executive director. So the recommendation we have tonight is the council endorse the economic development strategy, endorse the charter, and then direct staff to work with the Class B shareholders, prepare the letters of incorporation, and return to an upcoming meeting for your approval. That's my presentation, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Great work. This is a culmination of a year, I think, since the task force has been meeting. Just a question on the strategy. With the new board that will be created and the CEO, is that strategy going to be fleshed out anymore, or is essentially the document that we're seeing is sort of sets the stage for the work plan for the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor Gesselbrock, the idea is that the agency is using the strategy. And so the strategy defines the work that the city team will be doing internally, as well as the external agency. Some tasks are better done in-house, largely a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the advocacy, it's kind of some discussion we have with health and housing is probably better done through the corporation. And so we've defined it, it's a bit broad at the moment so that each group can kind of figure out their pace, but we'd be expecting an annual work plan from the corporation, which will align with the strategy, and they'll show which of those elements they're working on. And of course, there'll be a whole governance reporting back to council on a regular basis. So you're getting feedback. You can give feedback to the corporation on their performance.
Great. And just to follow up, I understand there's a whole ton of first things first that need to happen to get this the corporation going, and just basic items to get our whole economic development program up and running. I did feel just with this development strategy, there's one focus area of social and environmental capital. I noticed that the sort of strategies and description of how a focus and goal around environmental capital was pretty light. It was mostly all focused on social capital, which is, great things in there, but there wasn't actually anything on environmental capital. And so there's a few things where words are mentioned in the strategy, but the integration with sort of the larger city focus, probably, I'd like to see it a bit more fleshed out. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And is there room to say, as we go through our official community plan process and sort of we get a better idea of sort of, how the donut integration is what that really means and how that, can support economic development. I was just curious, is there room for fleshing things out a bit more?
Yeah, so through your worship at Council Gilstrap, absolutely, yeah. And I think what you'll see is as we work on Reimagine Nanaimo and as you're setting your other priorities, because I think when I look at the Reimagine Nanaimo documents, you get a lot of feedback from the community, right? You have 5,000 voices, giving you their ideas on what their priorities are. I imagine you're going to come back through this process and give us direction as to maybe where we're amending the strategic plan or some other areas of focus. And really it's about kind of tying those priorities back into this. One of the other areas that we could have, that we haven't tied in directly in here is the whole culture section of that, which is being done through Reimagine Nanaimo as well. So I think there's elements of that could be brought into ECDEV strategy a bit more, and certainly on the environment side. I think there's quite a few initiatives that we'll be flagging in Reimagine in the whatever the OCP master document is called, and those can tie back in. Yeah, lots of opportunity for that.
And just one more, just in terms of the process of, say, amending the economic development strategy, sort of one aspect of the strategy is executed by more in-house staff, which is more associated with council. But then there's another part of the strategy that's more under the control of the external agency. So I was just curious, when changes or when a new strategy is being developed, how much say does council have on an update or a revision, or even when the next strategy is done, how much is going to be done by the external agency and how much is going to be done sort of by council and staff?
Yeah, so through your worship, I mean, my goal would be that this is done, that the in-house team and the corporation, while maybe sitting in different areas, work very closely with each other. And your council's funding the corporation. I think if there's amendments that are being made to the strategy, then I think there's an expectation that council would be involved and providing their blessing to those amendments to it. Yeah.
Okay, great. And sorry, one last little thing too. Just with the principle of circular economy, I think in our sustainable procurement plan, there's a reference to the definition of circular economy from the Helen MacArthur Foundation, but that one gives a good concise definition of the principles of circular economy, which is like keep materials in use, reduce pollution and waste, and regenerate natural systems. And I think that, as we look at what that looks like in terms of our economic development, I think it'd be useful to have that definition there for circular economy, just to get that messaging and language out there, so that as community works to develop things, that those ideas are present. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Corson. I do have a couple of questions in a second about the charter and the governance model. But first, I just want to say that I spent a part of Saturday reading this report carefully and going back to several sections. And lately, I feel I haven't been supportive of everything that's come across council's desk, but I was very impressed with this report. and I'm happy to support it. I think it's hugely important for our city's future and for our economic growth, and I think it's a very valuable initiative to advance. So I want to thank you and everybody who worked on it. I think it really will be integral to our future. I like, among other things, that it has what I consider to be balanced goals and fairly realistic goals. I think it is holistic. And I noted, yes, it has social and environmental capital, but I really like the fact that we're also looking at and considering the importance of human capital, economic capital, business development, innovation, technology, place marketing, as you've indicated, and maybe other things down the road, Mr. Corson. When I was considering those goals, I couldn't help but notice the diagram on page 219 of my agenda, and it was one of your slides. And, you know, it just jumped out at me. It was this circular shape with a hole in the middle. And I don't know what it reminded me of, but it twigged something. But seriously, in this report, in this model, there it is. I'm getting hungry just looking at it. I feel that this model, in my opinion, my personal opinion, and I'm not trying to be funny here, only a little bit, has a lot more meat on the bones than the pastry product that had very little nutritional value to me. So I really like these goals. I like this model. I like the fact that it is more holistic than the other one that we talked about. I'm not going to name it. And it's more to my taste. So I think this should be our cohesive vision for all city initiatives and planning processes. And that's, again, how highly I regard this report. But I did have a couple of questions regarding the governance and the charter. And the first one is to do with the hiring of the executive director, which I assume will come out of the budget for this project. But I'm curious what role the city's economic development officer would play in this proposed charter.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. We actually call that the bagel economy. It's,
Good.
It's high in carbs, but very tasty.
I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy, you know? Okay, you got it. Maybe
You're
some
all
cheese
making
too.
the mayor hungry.
Sorry. So the way economic development is being delivered, as recommended by Mr. Nielsen, is that we have the in-house team. So we have our economic development officer, Ms. Manhouse, and there's an economic development manager in-house. And then there's the external corporation or the agency. And so really for that relationship to work, they might be in separate entities, but they're very much working together. You know, Ms. Manhouse with her data would be sharing information all the time. I really see them kind of as a team working together. Although that one's out of house and two people will be in-house. And so that person, the executive director, would be hired by the corporation, and the board would be the people hiring that individual. But I think it's very critical that whoever they hire has the right temperament to an attitude to is a team player, so we all work together.
Right, thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, a related question regarding the charter and thinking back to NEDC and what happened to that. And one of the faults that I think we found was there wasn't a clear defined mandate of how the organization, the arm's length organization, would be accountable to council and communicate with us. And I don't know if you've gotten to that point of consideration, but I would expect there would be something like possibly quarterly reports or some type of definite model that council would feel that the organization is accountable to us.
Yeah, through Your Worship. So some of those details will be fleshed out in, before we come back to you with the letters of incorporation, because I think you want to be comfortable with understanding the reporting structure, and that will all be fleshed out in the next step.
Sure.
But the idea is that you will have, I'm just going to refresh my memory here. There is a city representative on the board as well, which I think is a little bit different than before. So you'll have likely one of yourself or a senior leadership team member on that who can provide regular review of what's going on and feedback if it's needed.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this. Thank you.
Councillor Churley.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to first of all start by thanking my partner in crime, Councillor Martman, for equally chairing the meetings. But my big thank you is for Mr. Corson, who I think without him or somebody with the same skill set, we'd be mired in all kinds of technical details that we'd still be back in square one. So thank you, Bill. I just got a few things I'd like to say. First of all, I was a little hesitant when it was suggested that the Economic Task Force should be also talking about health and housing and working together with that committee. But then a light bulb went on, which doesn't happen very often. But anyway, and it was the interconnection between the homeless, the drug addictions, the mental health things that actually is a deterrent for attraction of better paying jobs, better, investment in our community. So now I get it that we need to work together on this. And the next thing I'd like to say is that the one thing that gives me a whole lot of hope is on page 63 of the report, number 6, placemaking and attraction. And the first paragraph, I think, says it all, and that is, I won't read it, but basically we're going into a new era and smaller communities are right at the threshold of being able to take advantage of this. And I think this is our huge advantage to take advantage of this scenario. Two things to answer Councillor Gesselbach's concerns. If we have another strategy that comes up, I foresee the allocation of looking after that. It could be both in-house and external, but it all depends on what skill sets are involved or needed to make sure we get to fruition of whatever that strategy is, as to which one it will fall under. Regarding the environment, I think it's kind of intrinsically integrated throughout the strategies for the most part. I mean, I look at placemaking, for example, and the fact that we're looking at the tech world and the fact in technology and innovation, that it does has an effect on, certainly on environmental issues, because we're not necessarily jumping in a truck to deliver something. So while there's nothing specific in there, I think it's kind of laid out in amongst all of the strategies that is one of the considerations. So thanks to everybody.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I've made note to get Councillor Thorpe a maple bacon donut, so hopefully we can get another convert in the donut movement. My one question through to Mr. Corson is, obviously this was done through the time of COVID, the structure, the plan, but even on top of that, the world seems to be changing very quickly and for a whole host of reasons. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, or through the discussions, was there talk about both in terms of the actual structure, but also the plan, the ability to be adaptable, and how will we change, whether the points Councillor Gesselbach hit upon are unforeseen events, the pandemic continues. Is that sort of built into the plan or the structure so we can be adaptable and flexible as things arise?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Brown. So certainly the consultant who works on many of these strategies said, these really have a life of 3 to 5 years. And I think depending on the pace of change, I'm hoping this is a 5-year plan, but where we're heading, and maybe it is a 3-year plan, right? Because if who would have expected last year? And when I look at the number of people that are, I think the pandemic has encouraged more people to leave cities and to come to medium-sized communities like ours. I think we're a very attractive place for people to come, and I think we're going to see as more residents come here quickly, there's going to be more opportunity. New businesses are going to appear, new opportunities are going to arise, and there's probably stuff that we never thought of is about to appear, right? And I think the importance of having a strategy is so that there is some focus and there are some deliverables, and certainly you can change course as you need. But I think it's very important for the first year or two to have a bit of focus and to try to knock off a few of these. A lot of these projects, I think, are because it is a broader strategy. are resilient, and there's things like downtown revitalization and the infrastructure pieces. I don't think those are going to change too much. I think those are there. I hope on the kind of health and housing file, I hope that we do move the needle on that, in the next couple of years, and maybe very optimistically in 3 to 5 years, that's maybe not such an issue in the city anymore, right? And that'd be nice that we could then put our focus to something else. But yeah, there certainly is flexibility to move priorities around. I think I would expect the in-house team is going to always be checking in on council and priorities and adjusting their work plan accordingly. And I think the external corporation would be wise to follow the direction of council and the Class B shareholders who kind of represent the broader community and its priorities. So I think you will see this evolve, whether it's 3 years in or 5 years in, but definitely within 5 years, it'll be back for a major refresh. And after 5 years, sorry, if I may, the idea is to do a check-in with everybody after 5 years and look at this structure and see if it's still working for us. So, this is based on the consultation that Mr. Nielsen did in 2019 with our shareholders and with the wider community. At the end of 5 years, we might say, this hybrid model doesn't work. We want to try something different, and that's certainly open to it. So the partners have been asked to contribute for a 5-year period. And then after that, we'll take a sober second look and see what's working, what's not working.
With respect to the Class B shareholders, how do we track the in-kind or, the inputs in from the other organizations, and what happens in the event of the founding Class B shareholders if they essentially do not pay their share? Are they out? Are they replaced? How do we navigate that world if we end up there?
Yeah, through your worship, I think that'll be the information we'll work on in the letters of incorporation and kind of the procedures bylaw piece that'll go with it. I assume if somebody is no longer able to pay, it is quite a modest amount. I would personally, I would think at that point that organization is not that interested in being part of the corporation, and maybe it's best if they step down to that point. Yeah.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. It seems that Councillor Thorpe is not a person who rests on his laurels, and after being quoted in an international magazine of known dude, is now working on his second quote. My questions are the 300K for the standalone agency is, I agree with you, it's probably not enough. But there's do you have the other cost that is borne by the city for the internal agency?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the internal staff team is this year's budget around 250. So with the external agency, we're actually carrying money over from last year as well. So there's 300,000 plus 169,000. So that's 469. And then the $25,000 contribution this year. So this year, it's actually quite well funded, I think, for what's really going to be a 6-month. By the time I think we get the corporation up and running, it's probably going to be the summertime. So I see it having a 6-month period to kind of get up and going, and then by the fall they should be in a position to understand what their needs are for 2021, which could then fit in nicely with your budget cycle. And then internally, we have it's really just staffing. It's the manager and the economic development officer and a little bit of money for studies, etc. Now, the consultant recommended that for a city of Nanaimo size, you would normally budget between $800,000 and $1 million for economic development. Of course, we've got the split, so you're at, we're not quite there, but you're not that far off either once you start adding everything together.
And the deliverables, am I to gather that they start around page 70 on the report, organization for delivery? Those are the deliverables we'll be expecting from this organization?
Yeah, I think so. The report has all the actions laid out, and it talks about who's doing what. I think as we work on the letters of incorporation and we come back to council, we'll have that list a little more, we'll refine it a bit more for you. So this was the consultant's recommendations. I think I'd like to sit down with the Class B shareholders if council were to endorse this and say, okay, we are moving forward. Here's what the consultant recommended. What are we going to commit to council that we're going to achieve over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? That would come back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I just wanted to, in the beginning, Councillor Gesselbach was talking about the donut economy, and I just wanted to flesh out that there was more in depth on page 236, just a little bit, but I think we need to talk about this more and more so that people in the public and for ourselves, that we get this concept. The environmental capitals linked to the economy can be explained by the donut economic model popularized by British economist Kate Raworth. The inner ring of her donut sets out the minimum needed to lead a good life according to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The outer ring represents the ecological ceiling across which cities should not go. So the inside of the donut, that nice little ring there, the inside of the donut represents a disadvantage who can be targeted for inclusion in the inner ring. So that sweet spot, which is why it's called that sweet spot, is that donut. So it's little bites we're taking, as this is new for our city and our economic model. But I think what it really means is attracting the right kind of economy to grow in our city so we can meet all the needs of both economy, social needs, and the environment. And I think this will stay strong as long as we're on council. This will remain one of our focus. So I would like to give the honor of moving the motion to Councillor Turley, who I partnered with, and thank you to everybody else. This has been a great year of experience, and everybody on the task force was really engaged, and we couldn't have done this work without them. So thank you to everybody.
So you've moved the motion, a recommended motion, seconder?
I wanted Councillor.
No, apparently you did and you're seconding.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I should have phrased that better. Do you wish to say anything further? Because we have Councillor Gesselbach back on the list.
Nope.
Yeah, just first off, good work, everybody, and getting this done. Just speaking to the whole green and environmental aspect, I mean, I appreciate that the words are, in the plan, and I think that, as we go forward, we can look at ways of actually actualizing some of these ideals. And I just, was inspired by Vancouver in 2010 when they sort of had being the greenest city, and they set sort of a green economic development plan where they set targets for number of green jobs, and then also incentive programs to promote businesses and just greening their operations. And it's quite remarkable, actually, the amount of improvement and numbers of jobs that they attracted from that sector. And we're just so close to Vancouver, where there's already a strong network of businesses of that way, that it's quite an opportunity for Nanaimo. And I think that it's an opportunity that we'd be wise to capitalize on, going forward. And so I look forward to the plan, as it becomes a little bit more specified, to delve into that. Thank you.
Mr. Corson, page 286, the corporation documents, the corporation charter, the shareholders together select and appoint the remaining 3 voting directors, including 1 from the social services sector from persons who apply to the board. Can you explain why that was included?
Sorry, Your Worship, why we included one member from this? Yeah, and that was, yeah, thank you. So that was an important point, going to Councillor Turley's earlier mention, that one of the, I think, recognitions was that in order to have a strong economy, you have to make sure that everyone in your community is being looked after, not just the few people. So the idea here was, while the board itself might have, we'll have our Class B shareholders and might have business leaders on it, but it's really important to recognize that our more vulnerable citizens in the city are being represented on this board as well, and that their thoughts are being incorporated into the work plans, etc. So that's why there was a recommendation to include a board member from that sector to provide that flavor to the rest of the group.
During the discussions, was there any mention of the possibility of appointing someone from organized labor?
There was not, Your Worship.
And the reason I raise that is, and I'm going to slip into the donut tonight. This council has decided, for better for worse, that we want to have a more socially responsible, environmentally sensitive council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have an economic development plan, which I must offer my compliments for, generally speaking, which is, it's a wonderful document. But in this community, all of the major and largest employers that really help drive this economy are all union operations, mainly public sector, the school board, the hospital, Vancouver Island University, the regional district, the city of Nanaimo. We have very few large private industry unions, private sector unions, but we do have Harmac, and we have other places like that. Unless the numbers have changed, I understand or believe, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that the Ontario Teachers Federation Pension Fund is the largest private pool of capital in Canada. And it just strikes me with great respect, having watched this last century roll by, and we saw how Germany came out of the Second World War, not just with the benefit of the Marshall Plan, but deliberate government policy that involved a union, if you will, amongst government and labor and private business or industry. They were able to sustain an economy that made Germany the envy of Europe economically, and it is still the linchpin of the European economy. And it just strikes me that one of the things that the corporation may wish to consider is the involvement of some senior member of one of the local unions, particularly one who sits on the pension plan board of trustees of their various pensions, because if there is an opportunity to attract capital, and many union pension funds have that as part of their mandate, to vote and be involved in progressive, environmentally sensitive, modern approaches to economic development, that would be a way to do it. It just strikes me, if we're going to get on the ship, then let's fuel her up as best we can. And I just throw that out for thought. I see I've inspired Councillors Brown and Bonner, which I hadn't hoped to do because it's now 10:15, but we're going to listen anyway. So gentlemen, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think that's a great idea. I love the donut thinking, and I'm just wondering, because we have the motion on the floor, is that something that we entertain at a later date? What's just process here? Because I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you. I would just comment, look, there's other ways to appoint directors, but I think that the Economic Development Corporation, when the shareholders meet, needs to think about this. If we're going to attract outside capital or even in British Columbia capital of any significance, there are lots of pension funds. The operating engineers, for instance, built the Coast Bastion Hotel. There are examples in this community of the importance of economic development that came about as a result of the relationship with unions. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I think that's also a rather good idea. I'm not sure why we haven't looked at it already. I would definitely be in support of that if it came as an option. I'm not sure if we need to attract the pension plans. We're already attracting the pensioners to move here, so might as well.
Cigar. All those in favor? Any contrary? Carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. The next item is the Mid-Island Business Initiative Tech Nanaimo final report. Mr. Lindsay, but you're going to bump this to Mr. Corson?
Your Worship, only if there's any... Sorry, Your Worship, only if there's any questions of council. This is really just an opportunity to close the loop, so to speak. Council, as outlined in the report, council agreed to provide funds to MIBI to complete this work back in 2019. And we originally received this early in 2020, and I think there was actually at one point we were scheduled to come before council with a presentation from MIBI, but I think during COVID those things kind of slid off. But I would say that this report, and maybe this is what, if you have questions, Mr. Corson can speak to, has certainly been considered as through the process that you've just heard about and included in those discussions. So certainly happy to take any questions that council may have on this.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have any questions. I just want to say, after reading it, that I think it's valuable information for the economic development function of the city. I have to admit I was a bit leery when I heard some of the rumblings of issues with it, but having read it, I think it's excellent information, and certainly some of it will go with the test of time. Other parts of it will, of course, have to change, given not the speed of changes in that particular world. But I think it's excellent that we have this to be able to give to both the internal economic development and the external agency.
Thank you very much. It's simply for our information. No further questions. The next is the 521 Hecate Street Acceptance of Project Under Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw 2018, number 7261. And Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council is aware, you have a tax incentive program that encourages investment in the downtown core. This project meets the criteria of that program, and we're recommending that Council authorize it to be included. This is for a 10-unit project at 521 Hecate Street. I would say Hecate near Selby if people are looking for the general location. Again, another infill project in the downtown. Recommendation is outlined in the report, Your Worship.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Motion that council approve the revitalization tax exemption agreement for a proposed 10-unit multifamily development at 521 Hecate Street.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Turley.
Oh, my light went off, sorry. Okay. Thank you, Worship. I just have a question that what the tax exemption is. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's the tax assessment of the development that is forgiven, not the actual initial property value.
Your Worship, Your Worship, thank you for the question. It's the result of the net investment on the property and on city portion of the taxes only. I think that's important to note, on city portion of taxes.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Brown is opposed. Motion carries. Item 13, bylaws, zoning amendment bylaw 2020 number 4500.171. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2020 number 4500.171 to rezone 405 Rose Hill Street from single dwelling residential R1 to low density residential R6 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The bylaw status sheet is for information only. There's no notices of motion. Under other business, Councillor Armstrong, motion re reduction in business license fees for liquor primary establishments.
Yes, I'd like to move that council direct staff to reduce the 2021 business license fee for liquor primary establishments from $1,100 to $165, and then I'd speak to it if it's seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner.
Yeah, just the rationale behind that is one of the reasons for the additional dollars was to offset the cost of the bar watch program and policing officers and overtime, which isn't happening right now. So they're basically they're running the same as a restaurant. So I believe they should be paying the same fees as a restaurant, and that's only for the year 2021 until we can reassess COVID. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I believe in fairness, but I need some information on this for background, and maybe Councillor Armstrong or Mr. Lindsay or staff can help. Basically, our business fees are $165 for the most part. My understanding was that if liquor establishments wanted to be part of the Bar Watch program, first of all, it was voluntary. So please correct me if I'm wrong. And secondly, I'm understanding from this, it seems to imply that the city collects the Bar Watch fee as part of our licensing process, which I certainly wasn't aware of. So could I get some clarification on those points?
Your Worship, I'm not sure I have all the answers about the Bar Watch program, other than I would state that I know of all of the liquor primaries in the city, certainly not all liquor primary, which would include all pubs throughout the community, are not all in the Bar Watch program. It's generally those nightclubs that operated in the downtown. I do believe that Councillor Armstrong is correct that generally when we were looking at our last review of the business licensing, the idea was to increase the fees to cover off the cost. Now, I think all business license fees go into general revenue, and then the money to operate, any money that we would have on the city's end to operate or support Bar Watch would come out of general revenue. So there's not necessarily a separate account set up, but definitely that was the intent, that we bring in more money from liquor primary because they had a higher response from bylaw and police.
So if I may, Your Worship, because I'm still confused on this or uncertain, is the model that a bar comes to get their business license and we say to them, okay, you owe a basic fee of $165 plus you owe us $1,000, whatever it is, for the Bar Watch?
No, Your Worship, it's not broken down like that. It just simply says in our business license bylaw that if you're running a liquor primary, whether that's a nightclub downtown or a neighborhood pub somewhere outside of the downtown, that you would pay $1,100 rather than the $165 that most businesses pay in the community. You'd pay $1,100. So almost all businesses in the city pay $165. The bylaw has very few exceptions. Banks, casinos, and liquor primary are some of the limited exemptions in the bylaw.
And if I may, Your Worship, I'm sorry to prolong this, but then that extra money is needed to cover the cost of the Bar Watch program?
Your Worship, this is where I would have to report back to council if you want specifics on that. My understanding, generally, it was agreed that these businesses had a higher demand on our services, either bylaw or police, and as such should pay a higher business license fee. I don't know if the difference was based on distributing the cost of running the Bar Watch program. I don't have that level of detail.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you very much. I guess that being the case, I'm not comfortable supporting this at the time. I'd like more information from the RCMP about the costs of their Bar Watch program and how those funds are collected and administered. And I also feel that hopefully by the end of this coming calendar year, things might return to some semblance of normal, where we might in fact want the Bar Watch program operating again, because it's, in my opinion, something very valuable, and I'd hate to lose it. So by basically saying to liquor establishments, so you can bail out of this now, I fear that we might have trouble getting them back into it later. So I'll listen to what other councillors have to say.
Councillor Armstrong,
I can reply to that. The program is run by overtime. So anybody that works on Bar Watch, it's all on overtime. It's not regular duties. So there's a call out for members to come in to work Bar Watch, and that's all on overtime. The Bar Watch program is only, for the most part, in the downtown core, although it does stretch out to some of our restaurants. The reason that I bring this forward is the Bar Watch program is not running right now because the bars aren't, first of all, most of the bars aren't working or running. Most of them are being used as restaurants right now. So I feel that we're penalizing them when they're being used the same. You can go to Smitty's and have all the drinks you want and they pay $165. Yet if you want to go up to Simon Holt's pub or the Queen's, they pay $1,100. And they're doing the exact same service right now because there are no additional police services required. So we're asking them to pay for a police service that isn't being used right now. And it won't be happening until after COVID is over because of the COVID rules. So for me, it's like we're penalizing these people to pay $1,100 when they're not even open and they're not going to be allowed to open, yet we're still collecting $1,100 from them. So why don't we collect what we're collecting from the restaurants, the pubs that are food primary? So that's why I made the motion, is for those reasons. It's that they're being penalized. You know, they've been asked to pay more to offset policing costs, which is not an issue. But right now, they're not running, they're not working, and they're having to pay $1,100. They've also had to lay off 50% of their staff. They're at less than 50% capacity. Then the government came in without any notice, shut down their New Year's operations, which cost them a lot of money. They don't even know what's going to happen with Super Bowl Sunday yet. So I just thought, from my perspective, and I had a lot of pro comments from it to my voicemail and email, was that this is a way to help offset some of the costs for them. It's not a lot of money. It's a difference of less than $1,000. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I read the motion as council directs staff to reduce the 2021 business license fee for liquor primary establishments from $1,010 to $165. So it's just for 1 year. I can understand the rationale because these establishments have been hammered because of COVID, and this is a way to give them a break. They are liquor establishments, and when they're up and running regularly, they do draw on much more city resources for bylaws and police by virtue of, you know, alcohol involved. And I think that it's appropriate to have a higher charge for that. But for 1 year only, I think that it's fair to give them a break. Well, there's less people going to these establishments. 2022, when COVID's all over and we'll be whistling a great tune, it goes back up to 1,010, and I can get behind that. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Pretty well for the same reasons. I think this is just a way of helping out establishments that are hurting to this time. Basically, they are restaurants. They're closed at 10. That's when last call is. They're at half capacity. This is a little thing that we could do to help out. And I think since the federal government and provincial government helped us out considerably, it would be nice to pass a bit of it on. Thanks.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I just would like some determination of how little this actually is. How many are we looking at saving $1,000? Do we have any idea?
Yes, Your Worship. Again, I kind of anticipated this question might come, so we did look that up. There's 29 liquor primary licenses in the city. So if you look at the $1,100 per license, that's $31,900 that we would bring in this year. Typically, if that's reduced down to $165, that would bring it down to $4,785. So basically a reduction, the difference being just over $27,115 is what we're talking about.
So we're not talking large amounts of money here. That's fine. Good.
Not till we hear from Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so I will support the motion, but I would appreciate a follow-up with staff at some time in the future, just regarding the guidelines for Bar Watch, how exactly that is operated, how it's set up, how the fees are collected, and so on. So for future, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I think this is a very good motion and reflects a reality in the hospitality industry that is really suffering in this community. So, seeing no further speakers, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Councillor Hemmons' motion memorandum of understanding between Island Health and BC Housing and timeline for the implementation of a situation table. Title's longer than the motion.
Thank you. I will move it as written.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And the next is Councillor Bonner and Councillor Hemmons' motion temporary emergency accommodation. And seconded by Councillor Bonner.
Absolutely.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oops, Councillor Thorpe, sorry.
Yeah, I apologize, Council. I do have a question because the wording of this motion, I'm not quite comfortable with it. And partly because I recall an earlier motion in our term which was worded somewhat similar, and I misinterpreted it, and other councillors read it a different way. So when I see wording that says, prepare a report as quickly as possible outlining options for implementing a temporary emergency, so on. To me, that reads, we're going to implement this. We want you to come back and tell us the different ways that we could do it. And what I would be much more comfortable with is wording that suggested that staff please bring forward information related to the Cowichan model with some analysis of pros and cons for a future council discussion. So maybe I am misreading things, but this has happened once before. So I want to be very clear on what the intent of this is. Is it simply to get background information, which a couple of councillors have already to some extent gathered? Or is it actually going a step further than that and saying to staff, here's what we've found for you. Now you tell us how we're going to implement it. Because if that's the intent, then I'm not prepared to endorse it at this time. So
I will look to councillors Hemmons or Bonner to answer that, but my reading of the motion is it has everything to do with a report being prepared but not implementing anything, particularly given my limited understanding of the Cowichan housing model. So that I think Councillor Thorpe, I certainly appreciate your comments, but unless Councillor Bonner advises otherwise or staff indicates that they interpret it differently, then
Oh no, I think you're bang on, sir. A report has to come back. At that point, this council will have an option in front of them, and then we'll be able to debate it then. That's all I see this as.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I think that they're looking at options to implement one, but that doesn't mean that we have to do it. It just means like, because we're going to look for funding sources. So they may say that we found 5 sites. It's going to cost us 20,000 per site, whatever. And we've got this, we vote yay or nay. So I look at it as options are coming forward. And then, but the options would be to implement it. That doesn't mean we have to vote in favor of implementing. That's how I read it, but I could.
Famous last words, Councillor Thorpe, trust us. Yeah. Councillor Hemmons.
I just want to confirm that Councillor Armstrong's points are our intention. We're just looking for information, and that's why we reference potential operators, potential funding sources, monthly operation costs. We're not looking for a set program. We're looking for, if we were to explore this, these are options in front of us. It won't, our intention is not to lock us into anything here. It's simply to receive information, because Dawn and I did provide notes from our meeting with Cowichan, and I would prefer that staff give us their perspective on something like this rather than Dawn and I sharing notes and then slamming a motion on the table.
Oh, and I certainly agree with that proposition. Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've talked about this at the staff level, and I've actually been through a zoning case on this. It actually didn't get the council at the end of the day. It was withdrawn. And it was our intent, though this kind of compromises the timing, it was to seek input from stakeholders. So we'll refer a letter in case of what we did in Abbotsford was referred a letter to the Health Authority, BC Housing, the service provider community, to get RCMP, get a cross section of views as to what their thoughts were on this, and that took a little bit of time. So in fact, I don't think we ever did get something from BC Housing. You know, to get a holistic perspective on this thing would not work without a collection of all those entities collaborating to or being impacted by it and making it work. So it would be helpful to get insights and inputs from those folks as part, and that would all be anything we received, we would attach to the report as well. It's just reality. These are all entities that will be impacted by this. And to some extent, I'm assuming that a service provider would have to run it in the city, unless the city is asked to run it. And we simply do not have the capacity with our staffing that we have now, or the expertise. So we would be relying on the inputs from others to do that. So just for clarity purposes, we were hoping to bring back to you an information report that brought in as much insight from others that have skin in this. So I hope that's marries with the intent of the proponent of the notice of motion. But that was, unless we're hearing that incorrectly, that's what we would proceed for.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Further to what Mr. Rudolph said, I think it's imperative that we find out BC Housing's concerns or considerations in this type of project, because I'm not comfortable with the city of Nanaimo going forward, providing housing, whatever form it is, to the homeless, because that opens a bit of a door for the province to say, well, go for it. And so I would prefer to work with BC Housing, and if they think the model is not doable, then I'm not sure why we would be even considering it. So thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Thorpe for the final word.
Thank you, Worship. I think that the motion in the 3 bullet points to get the capital cost for 2 to 3 pilot locations, estimated monthly operational costs, potential funding sources, and potential operators. And then the third, opportunities for community collaboration and comment from the appropriate city departments, the RCMP, and community agencies, I think address the comments that Jake Rudolph made about, really getting commentary from all the relevant stakeholders. And then plus those bullet points will give, council a good idea of sort of what is involved in a project like this. So I strongly support this and think that it's the relevant information that we need to make an informed decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. So because I trust my fellow councillors and their good intentions, I'll support the motion. But without wishing to appear pedantic, I don't like the wording options for implementing. I'd much prefer, and I think the intent I'm hearing is simply to gather information and background for our examination. Having said that, I'll be very interested in what comes out of this and where we go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. I would happily receive the final motion shown as item 16. Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor, motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Corson, Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Sims, Ms. Faroki, Mr. Rudolph, Ms. Guri, Ms. Snellgrove, others, all who are here. Thank you for staying so long today.